I would like to call the January 22nd, 2021 West Contra Costa Unified School District Budget Committee meeting to order at 3:01. And hello to everybody. I am Leslie Reckler, trustee from Area 5. I'm the chair of the committee, and I'd like to introduce President Phillips, who is assisting me in the vice chair role on this committee. And this is my first chair, and so I'm open to the help, and I'm going to be asking for it today. And so I'm hoping that everybody will support me and make me fabulous, as I know you all will. Who else do we have? We have Dr. Wold.
Correct. We have myself in the audience. We do have Regina Weber, our Director of Business Services. We have a couple speakers that are time specific, so they'll probably log on a little closer to their times, and then we'll promote them during their speaking piece this afternoon.
Okay, and Miss Vega? Who?
She is the Senior Administrative Secretary for Business Services. She's serving the Debbie Haney role as our minute taker, since this is a board subcommittee.
Okay, great. Hi, nice to meet you. I don't think I've ever met you before, so I just wanted to say hello and make sure I knew everybody. May we please have a roll call?
Certainly. Chair, Trustee Reckler.
I am present, and good afternoon to everyone.
And Board President, Mr. Phillips.
Present. Good afternoon.
Great. Okay, so now just for a few little opening speech. Dr. Wold, do we have translation?
We had attempted to get it set up. It did not. We've had issues today. We haven't been able to get translation working. So nobody has logged in yet. There, we had requested one.
Okay. All right. So if that happens, please let me know so I can instruct people how to get a translation. And then
we are recording it, so we will be able to go back.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so that's a improvement for the future. I'll just make a note of that. Mm-hmm. And then I would just like everybody to know that as authorized by the governor's emergency executive order issued on March 17, 2020, we are conducting meetings via teleconference Zoom until further notice. How to address us due to the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, the manner in which the Board of Education meetings are conducted has changed. The meeting will provide public comment opportunities through the Zoom app or by telephone. And to indicate your desire to speak on an agenda item, raise your hand by clicking on the appropriate icon in the Zoom app or by pressing *9 if accessing the meeting by phone. In order to be recognized to speak, your hand must be raised before public comment begins for the item. Due to the Brown Act, board members cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda and do not usually respond to items presented in public comment. Okay, so that's all done. We're on to number 1B, approval of the agenda. Are there any adjustments that we would like to make? The one thing I would like to do, and I apologize for not doing this previously, can we put some time chunks on this so that we know how long we need for each of these, especially district cash flow? I was thinking at least 15 minutes because I want to talk about what this actually is in addition to what the numbers say. Do you think that that's enough?
I do. The way I plan to roll it out, I'm going to present it in a way where it will explain what we're doing, what we're looking at. So hopefully I'll be able to walk the committee through the cash flow. And we're actually adding something we've never shown before today that we think will make it more transparent to everybody.
Okay, thank you. And then how long do you need for the preliminary budget item H2E, I'm sorry.
I'm hoping to go through the whole presentation in 20 minutes and then the questions afterwards. So we're going to be tight to hit our 2 hours because of the time ones, but we'll try to be as close as we can.
Okay. And Item 2D, Kevin Gordon needs how much? I've got 2C, I figured out that was about 15 minutes and Kevin Gordon would be about,
Yeah, we gave each 15 minutes plus 10 minutes of questions for transition. My feeling was if we get ahead of the agenda, I would recommend we move cash flow up. But the idea was each would have 15 minutes and then 10 minutes of questions.
okay. Board Member Phillips, anything on remember deep dive, sorry. Yeah, okay, got it.
No, I don't have anything.
Nothing else? Okay, all right. Do we need to move to do that or are we okay just?
You're fine the way you are.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to public comment on this opening procedures 1C public comment. We have 20, I'd like to put 20 minutes with 3 minutes each since this is supposed to be our deep dive into the subject matter. Give people a chance to really speak.
And I'm looking, and at this point, I do not see any hands raised. And still do not.
Okay. All right, may I move on? Okay, great. Okay, so we're moving on to 2 discussion items, committee vision and purpose. Would you like me to share my screen or do you have it?
I believe I have the last version, and if it's not the right one, then we'll switch. So I will try to share my screen and we'll see if this is the correct one. And let me switch to, give it a moment to load up.
Okay. So to begin with, the vision statement, the board budget committee is designed to be a safe space dedicated to review, discuss, understand, explore, and learn about key budget and fiscal concepts, best practices and procedures, helping to ensure the district's overall fiscal health. For me, as a woman working with budget and finance, I felt it was really important that this be as safe a space as possible for people to learn. There are no stupid questions here. I really want, you know, really supportive environment where we can learn and be really open and come to a deep understanding in a safe space. Any comments on that? Anything we want to add? It's not final, it's a first draft to think through what we're going to do here.
I don't have any comments. I support your vision. You know, over time, the committees will change and the people will change and chairs may have different visions, but the vision that you're laying out for this time, I support you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the committee purpose. And I think we have a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about here. This actually did come out of our governance handbook book, but I know that we have a little misalignment there. But it was the purpose of the board budget committee is to guide budget and fiscal policy. And I think maybe we want to reword that. We review an alignment of resources to board goals, all audit reports with the respective auditor, excluding bond audits. We look at position control. We look at labor contracts for financial impact, excluding anything that would be in a closed session. We review monthly cash flow, proposed and interim budgets, unaudited actuals and actuals. We may coordinate with various district advisory committees on budget matters. We also, this comes from the governance handbook, actually, site-based budgeting and operations in its relation to the local control accountability plan. Any comments on that? I think we had some wordsmithing that we wanted to do.
Do you want to comment now?
Yeah,
or?
sure.
Okay. I think that there are some other responsibilities and you know, that we will have. And so like everything doesn't necessarily have to be listed here right now. We're not going to vote on the document. But the main thing that I want to get to is that the purpose of every committee is to support the work of the board. And where I've seen the misalignment happen over the years is when committees have their own purpose, and that purpose is other than what the board actually needs them to do. So that is the purpose. And then we may have, and that is the purpose of every committee, right? Now, each committee may have different things that they do to support the work of the board, but we all have the same purpose. And then as far as like, guiding the budget is concerned, all of our committees are really advisory to the board. So, we'll make recommendations, to the board, and the board will accept or reject or modify or whatever they do. But none of our committees are autonomous from the board.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Is there anything else? I also thought of a number of other things that would be really interesting to review. So we can put down something like other topics as needed or directed, if that's okay. Because I thought of tons of other great ideas that would be, I think would be really interesting. Okay. Anything else on this? And we'll take it back and wordsmith it and make sure it's perfect and bring it back, if that's okay. Good. Okay. Board member Phillips, President Phillips, help me with public comment. Do I take public comment right after this now? On individual items?
I think we skipped public comment. So it was approval of agenda. So roll call agenda, and then it was public comment.
Okay.
And we had no public comment.
We had no
and then
public
there's
comment.
and then there's none on individual items.
Yes, they're on each individual item. There should be public comment.
Okay. So would that be all of 2, just for clarification, or for each sub under there?
So the way I see 2 is A, B, C, D, and E are all individual items.
Okay. Okay. So should I take see if there's public comment right now? Yes. Okay. So why don't we do that? Thank you, everybody. First time, lot to learn.
You're doing great.
I am not seeing any hands, so I believe we can move to B.
Okay, goals and objectives.
I'll go back to that portion, and you should have the first part of it showing now.
Great. So this, once again, is just a first draft, and I do want to hear from people and then come back and eventually assign how we're going to measure ourselves. So this is just a first piece, and then we'll come back with some measurements. But our goals and objectives, we need to do our part to permanently prevent self-caused shortfalls. It's our responsibility to understand and work to implement best budgeting and fiscal practices, restore and build trust in our fiscal practices and policies, to develop board members that have a deep understanding of the budget and the budget process and cycle, to understand how to ask good questions about the budget, to educate our internal and external shareholders about the budget and the budget process, both the macro environment in which we operate, the state of California and how they fund us, which influences our decisions, and also work to separate the two, because we're running our own thing and they're running their own thing, and sometimes those don't align perfectly. And then budget training is develop a training program for key internal and external stakeholders, and then to work on our presentations for the people, our goals and objectives. Oh, there we go. Thank you. And that's through the data that we use, the visuals that we use, and the dashboards that we use. Anything else we would want to add or strike?
I support your goals, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anything we want to work on first? Is there an order we want to undertake? I mean, for me, I want to fast track budget training. I want to move that up and start working on it. Have a lot of ideas. You know, we started that before before I was elected, so I've got a lot of materials that I'm you know I'm pretty much ready to go on that. And then I also want to fast track some presentations for the people. You know, we've talked about that. I've already seen change, which I'd like to thank you for. I don't think I've said that before, but I know some things have changed and we have more to do. So those two I would prioritize. And the A, B, C, and D are more long-term because it's, developing board members that have a deep understanding. That's a long-term process. So with that, I'd also like to bring back next time some ideas of how to get there, benchmarking and measurements of what success would look like. So with that, I'm now free to take public comment, right? Okay, and if we have any public comment on number B.
I do not see any hands again.
Okay. All right, then we're up to 2C, State Educational Politics Update, Dale Shimasaki, Strategic Education Services.
And he has not logged in yet.
Okay. Do you want
So
to?
why don't we do cash flow? I think I can do it fairly quickly. And if we don't finish the conversation, we can come back if that would be okay.
Board member, President Phillips, are you okay with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then I'd like everybody to know that I found out today I had no legal paper, so I have the
It is definitely a challenge to put all of the months on one piece of paper. So I am going to bring up that in an electronic version to try to walk through what all of this information is in a way that hopefully will explain it. And the best way to explain cash flow is that when we're talking about cash, we're actually talking about what resources are in the county treasury that can be utilized to pay the district's payroll. We often have what are called accruals, accounts payable, accounts receivable, where the state of California will say, you need to count this as revenue right now in the budget, but we're going to pay you later. For example, the deferrals we're going to talk about in a moment, and I'm going to show you how that plays out. So when you get a cash flow receipt, it looks sort of like the budget, and that's why it gets a little confusing. This is our cash flow for this year, and I'm going to start right here in July.
Well, before, may I, if I may, yes. Will you go down your columns and talk about some of these things, like what principal apportionment is?
Yes, absolutely.
So give a little, let's go ahead.
Got it. So the state of California pays us through two sources of fund. We all understand it as local control funding formula, but the actual dollars come from either property tax, which is local property taxes that funnel directly. And then if local property taxes are not equal to the amount of funding for that school district, the additional amount is called the principal apportionment. That's the state's contribution towards it. Prior to Prop 13, it was all property tax that funded school districts. The state did not have much involvement at all in this. Now the state is the predominant funder. For us, what you will see in the first row 12 on this here, the principal apportionment, that's the state's portion of our income and local control funding formula, 189 million. We then have property taxes, which is 116 million. We receive all of the funding for the local charter schools that we oversee, and then we distribute those property taxes to them. So we get more property tax and apportionment than the actual district because we are the financial service for them as well. Miscellaneous funds are exactly what it sounds like. Often this is debt service, so it shows negative because money's moving back and forth. Federal revenue is what we anticipate receiving from the federal government. So the CARES Act would drop into there, Title I, Title II, those pieces. Other local revenue is very often different redevelopment agencies and other local property taxes that can play out if you have a MRAD, for example, or a parcel tax that might come through in the local revenues as well. What you don't see here is our Measure R revenues. Those go to a different fund and they don't play into our cash flow in the same way. So that's the top side, our revenue pieces. And then there's within, for another budget presentation, not tonight, I would like to actually break down each component of how the money comes and how it's distributed to the committee so that we can look through it. The second part of this is the expenditure side. And it's broken down by what are called objects, which are just descriptions in the standard accounting forms. So the first cluster is all of our certificated salaries, those that are teachers and certificate administrators, such as principals. Classified salaries are all of our support staff, along with certain administrative support that are non-teaching. My position, for example, would normally be in the classified. Employee benefits is all of the taxes that we have to pay, the health and welfare costs that the district pays, plus retirement and fringe responsibilities. And that 95 million is the benefits for both certificated and classified. They're not separated out in this form. Books and supplies is for things that we buy. Technology falls into there, textbooks, paper, all of the different items that we may need to purchase in the year. Services are all of the different services we need to contract for. Your utilities are in here, your insurance, all of those different pieces, along with consultants. If we do intervention programs, software, internet costs fall into there. Capital outlay is if you buy something that's more than $5,000. And then other outgo is usually your transfers from one fund to another. So what you end up with is your budget, how much you expect to receive in revenue, the $399, your disbursements, how much you expect based on your budget to spend in that current year. And then the bottom of this runs what is the increase or decrease and how much cash is available at the district level to ensure that we can pay all of our bills. Even if you have an appropriate budget, if this number down here goes to a negative, then the district would not be able to pay its obligations, even if it may on budget be positive. And so it's very important that we're always monitoring this number across the bottom. Now you'll see it looks very, very healthy at the beginning of the year, 143 million, 125 million. And the reason for that is that the county is a teeter district and teeter county. And what that means, teeter, is that for cash purposes, the county considers everything that we're going to receive in property tax as available the first day. So even though they don't put it in our account, we get it throughout the year. They allow us to, for cash purposes, consider all $116 million as being within our treasury. So what you see on this now, and we didn't used to do that, and it got a little more confusing, is that we start July with 21 million. Once we credit that 116, you can see that the beginning cash is much higher. In a normal year, the state then provides us state apportionment throughout the year. And so you can see that the property taxes, some of them are minus because that's the charter payments and the other things going out. But what you'll see is the state gives us a percentage of what they owe us each month. So in August, 7 million, September, 25, October, 12 million, going all the way through. But now you'll notice something starts to change. In February, they give us nothing. Everyone may have read about the deferrals. And so what we're talking about is the state tells us, for your budget, you need to consider that you've received all of your revenue. However, we're not going to pay it to you till the next year. And what this means is that we still have to operate and pay our bills. And as they defer dollars, other than March where they're giving us a decent amount, we're getting very little in February, almost nothing in April, very small amount in May when you compare to the previous months, and then nothing in June. So what this does, if we go down to the bottom here, is you can watch our cash numbers. We're at 90 million when the deferrals start. And then we start to spend all of that balance throughout until we get to June, where we would be out of cash as we're sitting right now, unable to make payroll because the state had not paid us that significant amount. I'm going to stop there for a minute, and then I'm going to show you how we address it. There's several ways we can address it. And we're going to bring a new form in that we've never shown the board because we just created it to show where our other funds are that do relate to this. But any questions here first?
Keep going. I have a bunch of questions, but we'll
Okay.
let you present and then come back in.
So I'm going to move to what we call a summary of all funds. The cash flow has always only looked at the general fund. It's never looked at the fact that we have other independent funds that have money. And under Ed Code, some of the funds we can make transfers back and forth with board consent, and the board does pass a resolution each year to allow that. It just happens behind the scenes so that we don't have to borrow cash, since all of these funds sit in the same account at the county, but they're separated on the ledgers. So that large amount in general fund you can see is right there. We have an adult ed fund. We have child development, our preschool. We have the cafeteria fund where the federal government pays us for free and reduced lunch. They pay very late, as you're going to see. It runs negative a lot, even though we have money coming in and out of there. We have Fund 17, which is the board's reserve. The slightly over 3% is not part of the general fund. We have the building fund. That's our Measure R funds. We cannot borrow from those at any time. They're there, but we cannot use them. And I'll show you that we differentiate at the bottom here. We have capital facilities. This is some of our funds that come through for developer fees, as well as some RDA, redevelopment agency, old taxes that come through. There is no money in the school facilities bond anymore. That was the state's version. Special reserve for capital outlay is our Fund 40. And this is dollars that are dedicated specifically for facilities. If you have a vacant property that you sell and no longer retain, the funds go into Fund 40 for that purpose. Bond interest and redemption is an account that the Measure R receipts are kept in to pay the debt service for all of our bond issuances. So again, that can't be touched for any cash purposes or anything else. Self-insurance is our risk management account. That's where our insurance is paid. Funds go through. And then Fund 71, there is two components to it. There's a cash component for our retirees, the other post-employment benefits. And we also have, outside of this, the OPEB trust that is irrevocable, that can only be used for paying those benefits. We pay monthly out of Fund 71, our retiree benefits. The general fund makes a transfer into 71, 71 pays the bills there as we go forward. So what we've done is we've created a calculation. What is the total balance, negatives minus positives, of everything that's in there that is available for use? And so we have that one there, which is our interfund balance. We then know that we have to maintain a 3% reserve. So not all of that would be available. And you'll notice this is only 152 million because we're only adding up certain funds to say what might we be able to do interfund transfers either way. And so when the formula here, it says D11, so it's the general fund, it's adult education, it's child development, it's the cafeteria fund, it's 19, Fund 40, 21, the self-insurance, and 17, the special reserve 3%. Those are the ones that are funds that we can borrow, but there's a second rule. You can never borrow more than 75% of any positive fund balance. So we reduced this number available down even more. And we calculate this all the way across the year. So I'll remind that we talked about, we were 8 million negative in Fund 1, our general fund, 10 June, which you can see right here. But we do have positive balances projected in other funds. And we have enough in those funds to be able to do an inter-fund transfer. And since the money's in the same bank account, it's just a paper memoranda. And we will not, at this point, this is brand new news, we will not have to go out based on our current projections and borrow from the county or the state or do a trans this year, even though the deferrals are continuing. This is probably the most positive news I can present out to the board. They're based on this. And so we've added this report because what we're going to do moving forward is be able to show on a monthly basis if we're having to do interfund borrowing either way because of when funds are paid. And so that is the quickest way I can kind of walk through cash flow. And I'll stop with that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And so I don't know on
Everybody-
timing if we want to do questions and continue this item or jump to our other item because the speaker has entered. So
correct me, the speaker is on a timeline?
yeah, I have, because I have both of them on different times. So you can never do time specifics perfectly. So it's up to the board. We can finish the cash flow questions and then go into them, and that will still be fine as well.
Board Member Phillips, what would you like to do? I feel like we're at a good point where we could stop, or it's up to you for.
I will follow your lead, ma'am.
Okay, I think I'm comfortable pausing for right now, and coming back to this. Feels
Okay.
like a good stopping point.
Perfect. So I am going to bring up one more
Scroll away.
Yeah, one more document there. You'll give me just a moment. I'm going to change. And then while I'm doing that, I'm going to promote the first of our panelists over. Let me find him. I saw him and I lost him. There he is. Okay. As I'm promoting Dale Shimasaki, I'm going to quickly share my screen to the best of my ability here and introduce this item here. Let's see here. There we go. Share screen. Sorry, too many tabs at the same time. So in our board policies, we do have an item that talks about advocacy and about being able to sort of direct what's happening. And right now, we are in a very unique time in public education. Public education has had to transform into distance learning almost immediately. Today's meeting is done over Zoom. The current laws, however, when we do come back, would immediately move everything back to the way it was without any reference to the things that we've learned today that we might want to keep. And that's going to require legislation to change the way we do business. And you're going to have the ability to influence different pieces. In addition, the way the state funds education has changed since Proposition 13, when we talked about property tax, into very different roles. I have a perfect example that I want to share really quickly is back in 2012, 2013, when Governor Brown first proposed the local control funding formula, it did not make it through the first year. The first year's proposal in January, it was not adopted because they didn't have all the details. They spent the next year really working to refine it. And I was working in a district where we did have an advocate and we had governmental relations services. They reached out to districts that would benefit and the challenges we had, and put us directly in the room with Department of Finance people that were creating the plans. And it influenced some of the things that you see in the supplemental and concentration grant formulas directly relate to a meeting that I happened to participate in almost 10 years ago. And well, what about if you think this, and then watching it play out? It's very hard to make a direct connection to these benefits, but being able to have more information and understand it in a much more timely basis really does make a difference. And so today, I'm asking the board just to hear from two different individuals and firms that support public education behind the scenes. They provide information to their clients directly on what is happening, what can happen. And I'd like the board to consider at the end, is there a place where these services might be beneficial to us, especially the district that we are unlike very many districts in the state of California. With our 5 cities, we actually touch almost every type of school district in California. And so we have a perspective. I'm in my 6th school district. This one is very unique compared to any of the other 5. I can take each of the 5 districts I worked in before, and I can say, well, that's kind of like Pinole. And this district is very similar to San Pablo and Richmond. And that district was very similar to Hercules. But I've never been in one where I can say I'm in all of them at the same time. And because we're there, I think we not only have a duty to ourselves, but to the profession of education to take the expertise that we have and have that direct connection to be able to influence policy that will help us and public education. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Dale Shimasaki, who will do a brief presentation on what services he and his firm provide. And then after that, we'll have Kevin Gordon talk about it. In all transparency, I have worked with both of these individuals in previous districts. They were there before I came, so it's not a bias in that sense. And I've been in districts where both of them worked with me at the same time. So there's overlap, but there's also different pieces. With that, I'm going to pass it to Dale.
Great, welcome to you. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share information about our firm with you. Just for the record, my name is Dale Shimasaki, and I'm the CEO of Strategic Education Services. I have a PowerPoint here I'd like to share with you briefly. I hope you can see it. Let me give you some background on our firm. We're an education and lobbying consulting firm, which was started under the current leadership since 1999. Our focus is strictly on K-12 and higher education issues in California. And we're a relatively small firm. We have 3 full-time staff. We also utilize 3 consultants. We have a part-time bookkeeper, and we have 4 student interns that we work with. Currently, we have 14 clients that we're on contract with. We also do some pro bono work on occasion with the clients in different community organizations when the need arises and there's an interest in helping them out. Our office is located in the downtown Sacramento area. We're walking distance of the state capitol and the Department of Finance, the governor's office, and all key agencies that are affiliated with different educational organizations. We've listed our website here for your reference to get more details about our firm. And we are one of the few lobbying firms in the Sacramento area that's a member of the good standing with the Better Business Bureau. Just to talk a little bit about our staff. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have 3 paid staff persons and 3 consultants. Steve Henderson just joined our firm. He recently retired from service with the California County Superintendents for Educational Services Association. And upon his retirement, we immediately called upon him to work with a couple of our clients, and he will be doing that at the beginning of this calendar year. He has worked also with the State Department of Education, the California Department of Finance, and the California School Employees Association. So he's had almost his entire career devoted to public education organizations here in California. Carol Gonzalez is our office manager. She runs the operations for us. She's a graduate of Sacramento State University. She's active in Sacramento Democratic politics and has worked with us for 3 years now. Myself, I started the firm with a partner in 1999. Prior to that, I had extensive work in the legislature. I worked for 11 years in the legislature. 5 years, I was the education advisor to the Speaker of the Assembly, Willie Brown. 3 years, I worked on the Assembly Ways and Means Committee, and 3 years with the Legislative Analyst's Office. I also did work for 5 years with City College of San Francisco in their administration, and I did some work in a federal program under the Clinton administration known as the Civil Liberties Public Education Program, where I was the director of giving out grants to inform the public about the Japanese American internment during World War II. David Nevin's been with our staff for about 7 years. He's our data expert and data analyst. One of our unique capacities as a lobbying organization is we simulate the impact of budget proposals on school districts. And we compare that simulation and impact on a district like yours to all other urban school districts or other school districts that have similar demographics. And that's a unique service that you'll see that we have. And we share that data with the legislature and key policymakers, both in the Department of Finance and the administration. Esperanza Ross has been with me for about 15 years as a consultant. She assists us on a number of education issues, particularly with disadvantaged populations. She has her own consulting firm and lobbying practice. One of her major clients are the United Farm Workers, and that's one of the key organizations she's worked with for the past 10, 15 years. Nico Chavez has been with us for 5 years. A little background: when I started the firm, I started with his father in putting together this firm, and sadly we lost Bill to cancer. Interestingly, when Nico was about 10 or 11 years old, we lost his father, but he became interested in lobbying. Now things have come full circle, and he wants to pursue a career in lobbying as well. So he has his own practice, but he also wants to be active in education issues. He works primarily on our school transportation coalition on school bus safety and trying to get clean air buses for school districts. I mentioned my client list of 14 clients. We have 3 K-12 clients right now. We also do consulting, which we don't represent for lobbying, but we just do consulting on education issues. They include the Gates Foundation, the California Teachers Association. We help them on the budget estimates related to Proposition 98. And we have an education coalition where I am the consultant. The education coalition is 9 statewide education organizations, the 4 management groups, the 4 labor groups, and the PTA. And they reach consensus every year on budget issues. And they're taking positions and reaching consensus on budget issues oftentimes becomes a starting point for budget deliberations and discussions in the legislature about what items to reach consensus on and which items to discuss in the budget hearings. Currently, we have 6 community college clients, and A lot of the issues here in the community colleges are focused on equity issues and the needs of our community college student population. And as you may know, community colleges in the three tiers of higher education is the largest system, but they also represent the highest proportions of disadvantaged students in the state. We also represent a couple of other associations and organizations. We represent the California Science Center located in Los Angeles, and also the Association of American Publishers. If you were to ask about our strengths of our firm, I would say that we have a passion. Though we started our firm, Bill and I, with a passion of serving those organizations and entities that represent significant numbers of low-income and disadvantaged students. That's what we did throughout our career on policies, and we worked in the legislature on various issues. We have a commitment to having, as you see on our staff, an ethnically diverse staff. We believe we could have high quality and provide high quality services to our clients with an ethnically diverse staff that shares in the issues that many of our school system serves. Cumulatively, we have well over 100 years of cumulative experience in working on education issues in state and local agencies in California. So we're familiar with the California landscape and what the needs are in California. And while we have a diverse staff, we have a reputation of having strong relationships with policymakers and stakeholders, and we seek to work with everybody, not just with a certain selection of the legislature or a certain caucus. We have relationships with elected officials who are both Democratic and Republican. We've been successful in securing funding for both Democratic and Republican administrations. We've worked with with the ethnic caucuses. That includes the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Latino Caucus. Esperanza does also work with the Women's Caucus as well. Our state agencies that we work with, we've worked with the Governor's Office, the Department of Finance, the Department of Education, over a number of administrations, not just the current and the prior one with the Brown administration. And again, we work with, because of my work with the Education Coalition and because of our past affiliations, we have strong relationships with both management and labor and the PTA. So we work with diverse organizations, diverse populations, and a variety of political perspectives. In terms of the services we offer to the state budget, there's two kinds of things to think about. One is the advocacy. What is it that your district needs and what your district wants in terms of changes in the budget, and that kind of advocacy includes testimony at budget hearings and meeting with staff on legislative committees and legislative offices, telling them your story, and oftentimes bringing you into these offices and having you share your story about how the budget or proposals would impact your district. We also prepare support letters and opposition letters to various issues on the budget that may emerge as they come to pass. And we have critical meetings that we set up with the Department of Finance and the Governor's Office who shape the budget process at various stages during the year. We work with the districts and our clients in developing a budget strategy and a plan. And I just gave you a simple calendar of how we do that. In the fall, we would set priorities with the district. January, we would do an analysis of the budget after it's introduced and how it impacts your priorities. We would work, after we work through on the budget hearings and the budget process, in May, we would provide you an updated analysis of the May revision to the governor's budget, and again, talk about how it relates to your district priorities and needs. And then we would, as we advocate through, we would try to get a budget that reflects your priorities and needs when it's adopted in June.
Hey, Dale, as we're going, just a time check, like another another like 2-3 minutes so that we can get to the question.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. I was just going to point over to that. Thank you.
And similarly for the legislative services, we would do the same thing for legislative services following the same calendar. We also provide services for other agencies as well, which includes the Department of Education. It includes doing lobbying visits, working with other state agencies that intersect with education. For example, Air Resources Board deals with clean air budgets, clean air buses, and we maintain constant communication. I just wanted to mention that, you know, contract lobbying firms also run into conflict of interest issues. We currently don't have conflicts right now among any of our clients, and we work on the front end to prevent conflicts from occurring. And when conflicts do occur, we work to resolve it among the parties involved. And we do not let these issues sort of leave you hanging, wondering what the conflicts would be. We work on compensation. We work on a 12-month contract. We bill on a monthly rate. The fee depends on the extent of your services. Some clients only want budget services. Other clients just want legislative services. Some clients want all of the above. So we negotiate on an individual basis of what the compensation would be. And for our K-12 and community college clients, I gave you a range of what the compensation is for the clients that we currently serve. Just closing out, we will be happy to provide you references on request. And just if you just tell us what kind of references you're looking for, client districts of your similar size, districts with, who work on legislative issues or budget issues, et cetera. So let me stop there and see if there's any questions or items you would like to discuss in particular.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Board Member Phillips, do you have anything you want to start with question-wise?
I know you don't have it, or I guess then that's not really a question. I don't have any questions. I don't have any questions.
Okay. Okay, well, I have a whole bunch, but I'll hold back. So thank you. I think this is a revolutionary, I'm very open-minded. I know you work through the PTA, most certainly. So one of the big things that I was thinking about was like, I looked at the client list and we just seem like this little minnow compared to, all these big school districts. And, it feels, I don't know, it feels like would anybody pay attention to like our line item, like our particular little line item wrapped up with all these other districts? Like, are we a tag along to what they want, or how do you think that would work?
No, I think I think every district is important, independent of size. And I think the thing is, you have to tell your story and we have to give you voice. And I think with all the clients, that's what we're successful in doing. And that's what we're able to do, to give you voice and to give you the attention you deserve in the legislative process. So it gets back to our strong relationships with the committee staff and the chairs and the committee members of the critical communities. And when we bring you in to have these discussions, I think because we have such strong relationships, they will listen and pay attention to what you have to offer and what you have to say. I think, I go back quite a ways with the district to the days of Bob Campbell. And I just remember some of the issues that emerged in the district, and issues, no matter how large or how small, they were given ample attention. And I think that could continue to be done with representation for your district.
So you don't think we would just be an add-on to whatever San Bernardino?
No, I think, because first of all, your asks will be unique. I don't think they'll be the same kind of ask necessarily. I think they'll be asks that will be given attention to by your legislative delegation, which is really important. So, all politics starts local and then it branches out from them. But when you go into your delegation, they will respond when they are informed of what you need and what you're looking for. The problem that always occurs is when you don't go in and you don't ask or you don't tell them, because if they don't know or don't realize that what you needed, then they'll feel like, oh, if I only knew that. So I think it's important to go in and let your voice be let your voice be heard.
I was thinking about being strategic, and any thoughts on like the county office of education owning this, and every district in Contra Costa County pitching in some way to support a countywide goal, which I thought might give us leverage, or I'm not
We
entirely
do,
sure, but
that does exist. There is some work that does go through each of the counties.
Yeah, so and that's different layers of strategy too. So, there's your district needs. I think there's your regional needs, and then there's the statewide needs. And you should use all those different layers to your advantage. But again, the things that are unique to your district needs a voice somewhere. So if you join on with a statewide group only, or if you join with the county group only, the problem is you have to reach consensus, and the multiple voices, they blend in, and the tendency when you have a group or an association of like 5 or 10 members, you have to sort of pile on, everyone's going to have their ask, and the ask gets bigger and bigger, and you lose sight of the fact of the individual. So that's why I think even with all these other districts that we represent, the individual voice still has to be heard. So it's still needed. So let me give you a specific example. The South Orange County Community College District is a basic aid district. So you would think, well, why does the South Orange County Community College District need to go to Sacramento at all? Because they're a high property tax revenue district. They don't need the state money because they get just a minimum amount. But it turns out they have a lot of problems and issues with some of the state policies that need to be addressed, and some of the categorical funds that they're eligible weren't being allocated in their favor. But that, even though that they weren't a big fish in the pond, as it were, their voice got heard, and they have significant representation. But they have 5 members, and only one of them is a Democrat. The remaining 4 Republicans still chimed in and raised concern, and they were able to get some changes on the categorical allocation because it didn't work for them. So they were a small, relatively small entity and has a small voice because they were basic aid, but still, because we alerted the delegation to things that didn't seem appropriate in the way they funded it, they were able to remedy the situation. So I wouldn't underestimate your voice. So
the other questions is how would our district work with you, and how would the board work with you? Those different level, like how does that work? And then how do we measure your success? Because this just seems so squishy.
So it's I think it's up to you and how you want to work with us, because we've had we have a spectrum of how boards and districts work. Some work exclusively through the superintendent or the chancellor. Others, we work directly with the board through monthly meetings and reports. So we're open to whatever method of communication you feel comfortable with. So I think it's up to you. We are happy to do monthly updates to board meetings if you need it. We're happy to do weekly calls. With all of our clients, we do weekly reports and monthly memos, updating you on what's been going on with your priorities. In terms of evaluation, that gets back to the calendar. We have a priority setting process, and we identify what priorities are important to you for the year. And at the end of the year, we're measured against those priorities that we set with the district.
Okay, so there is a priority.
So even though, you know, they sound
Yeah.
conceptually squishy, and they might be like, you know, increasing funding, you know, or having legislation that protects the interests of the district, we would go and at the end of the year, we would show you the bills that we worked on your behalf and the positions we took and what the outcomes were, what the amendments were you got the particular bills. So there's a variety of ways to do that. But as long as we have the conversation of what you're interested in concerns with, and then we could work through the year with what you have identified.
So we would determine whether it's staff or the board, or we communicate together like a series of goals or what's
Right,
coming up through the pipeline, and we, you know, at least track something out and try to.
right. And as the board, you obviously have the authority and the discretion to sort of decide how do you want to do that. So
Can you name, just very briefly, because we're short on time, can you name, you know, like at least one clear example with a tangible result? And I'll, you know, definitely, I'm certainly into references, you know, but you know, that's for later. But I'm interested in someone like something you did, a tangible result, and then we could follow up with a reference to just feel through the process. Or
So on our school transportation coalition, with a tangible result is that transportation funding got eliminated in the local control funding formula, and there was no general fund support for buses. And because it got eliminated through LCFF, because we collapsed all the categorical programs, what happened is we went to look for other sources of funding, and we were able to go through the Air Resources Board to find funding for clean air buses. And we got $25 million in funding for clean air buses, and we put a priority on the buses that were the oldest buses and the dirtiest buses that are around. As you know, there are some buses that are pre-Prop 13 era buses that are still operating in the streets, and students are riding in those buses. And we were able to get the Air Resources Board as an alternate source of funding to provide funding for the buses that were eliminated in the K-12 side of the budget. So that's one immediate a tangible thing, and you know, I could provide you the references from the School Transportation Coalition on that. So.
okay, thank you. And you covered conflict of interest. That was actually one of my questions. And you covered how you were compensated, so that's good. References, you have that. Any other questions, President Phillips?
No, ma'am.
Okay. With that, I think we'll move to public comment.
Well, we actually have one second presenter, then we
Oh,
would,
you want to do both of them?
yeah, let's do back to back. So
Okay.
Dale, this isn't rude, but I'm going to click the remove button on you
Okay,
and promote the next presenter
very
there.
thank you.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
bye. All right, with that, our second presenter, and I'll ask him to be as quick as he can as we go through this, is Kevin Gordon. I'm going to move him up to a panelist and he can introduce himself. He should come up in just a moment there, and hopefully he will unmute and bring his camera on there.
There we go. Good to be with you guys.
Hello, Mr. Gordon. Welcome.
All right.
Great. Well, I'll just jump into this, and in the interest of time, not go through a PowerPoint or anything. First of all, I just want to say at the beginning, again, I'm Kevin Gordon. I'm president of Capital Advisors Group, have appeared before the board in the past. The composition of the board has definitely changed since I was there. But I believe, Mr. Phillips was at that board meeting that I appeared at. What I want to do is first sort of acknowledge Dale Shimasaki, because I've worked with Dale, gosh, for almost 25 years. I'm an advocate for districts, particularly like West Contra Costa, having representation in Sacramento, and I'll tell you why. But you absolutely cannot go wrong by picking Dale's firm if you picked their firm over us. It's really about the fit with what your objectives are. And he's just got a long history of doing incredibly great work. So I just wanted to mention that to you guys. There are a couple of things that are virtually identical about our firms that are in terms of the price structure, in terms of what you would pay for advocacy. When I appeared before the board, we have a range just like Dale does. And for a district like yours, it tends to be the middle to the higher end of the range. You guys are a big district. You've got lots of issues that are going to require a good deal of interaction between officials at the state level and the district if we're going to serve you properly. But what I had pitched was the rock bottom end of that scale, which is the $3,000 a month. And the reason why I did it, the board was very articulate when I was there. We know what the financial challenges are in the district. And you guys, maybe later at some point when the district has multiple years of stability ahead of it that's clear, we could maybe consider doing something different. But in the beginning, we would have you in the range of the teeny tiniest school districts that we represent in the state. But I don't think you would see any difference in the caliber of representation you get. You guys are going to need some help, and we're going to be in their body and soul. I would also mention that the two K-12, we have a lot of K-12 clients. That's really where our business is. The two clients that Dale has are both clients that actually retained us after Dale had been in the district. They both have us on contract as well. So, the two individual districts that he had mentioned. And I think that's just a testament to the way the K-12 community that's interested in advocacy sees us. What I really wanted to express more than anything to you, and I'll take some questions, some of the same questions that maybe that you asked earlier, is what this is really about, what the decision is really about, is the degree to which the district wants to get engaged. The voices that they hear up in Sacramento, it's not a tag along, it's who's in line to be heard, who elbows their way through kind of the noise and says, we've got some issues that need to be heard. And there's a lot of other people that are making noise up in Sacramento, but it's about that. And the firm that you pick, it's really about not just saying, we're going to come up and, take you into the Capitol building and give you a nice, set of meetings at any given time. But it's really about trying to leverage the political assets you have. And it's absolutely crucial that what some of those assets are that this district can leverage. Number one, and it's really important, your state senator is going to be the chair of the full two-house budget committee. It's an enormous power for Senator Skinner. It's an enormous opportunity for us in representing your district because there's huge money issues that go down. One of the hallmarks of our firm, really our trademark, is on budget and finance, Prop 98. And I was originally part of that very first group when the Ed Coalition was established, sat there as Prop 98 was implemented for the first time. And am probably one of the very few people that still left that was a part of the original group after Prop 98 was passed, that was left of that Ed Coalition group. That's all the major groups, including labor and PTA, which we sat shoulder to shoulder with. We're also the only firm in the state that the PTA has ever engaged formally as advocates. Just FYI, so you know that.
I do, because I do a lot of work with them. So
yeah, and then you got Mark Desaulnier. You guys know, I think you may know that our founding partners, we got a couple of founding partners that are really worth mentioning. Jack O'Connell, the former state superintendent. Jack is one of these guys, if you've met him, he just astonishes me because one of the few people I've ever known as a politician who can serve 30 years in politics and have everybody still love him after he left. He's just very well respected at the Capitol building. the contacts that we have from all of us in our firm, we have 10 registered lobbyists. It is a bigger firm. K-12 is our sweet spot. Abbas Hajela, who is one of our founding partners, is a name you guys might know, is the guy, the lead attorney on the Robles-Wong case about adequacy of school funding, has basically been the lead lawyer or co-counsel of every major case that's gone to the state Supreme Court on school funding issues where we've litigated about Prop 98 and kind of the righteous cause, joined by those in the civil rights community and equity groups, fighting that good fight, which we've done with Abe in the leadership on those cases. So he's still engaged in all that kind of litigation. He is doing budget presentations this week. Again, one of the guys that really understands the way Prop 98 works as well. So I'm going to kind of stop there. There's a number of things that Dale covered that are going to be the same with a lot of the different lobbying firms. The same approach on conflict of interest, which is that if to some degree, we really haven't had those kinds of issues, but if let's say there's a district that's trying to mess with you guys or the county office, and you guys have a battle over, over geography or something, then we have to sit down and try to figure out, are we the best persons to get involved with bringing the parties together? And if we're going to get involved with that particular fight, or we just stay out of it or whatever. But what the first and most important thing, and Dale mentions this and has a lot of integrity in doing this kind of behavior as well, which is making sure that the minute we perceive a conflict, we disclose it to both clients and we let you guys decide. And that's the way to approach any kind of potential conflict of interest. So I think I'll leave it at that and see what kind of questions one of the other issues I was going to mention that is worthy to hit if I've saved enough time here. There are critical issues in this budget the governor's put up. Everybody gives sort of this kind of bland, budget looks good, gosh darn, we dodged all the cuts, we should be grateful. There are at least 4 or 5 critical issues in this budget that, depending on which way they go, will have a big impact on West Contra Costa Unified in a negative way. You want those issues to go a particular direction if they're going to end up helping this district. And what you want to do is take an opportunity right now when the budget's relatively good to get as much advantage as you can, because you guys have out-year structural problems. So I just want you to know, I really perceive that that's the first order of business for advocacy on your part, is to focus on the money part. So I'm going to stop there.
Great,
Yes,
thank you. Board Member Phillips, do you have any questions?
ma'am.
So basically, it's really the same questions that I asked
Yeah,
prior.
I'd love to
And
answer those.
was there anything that I missed there? I mean, I have a hard time feeling that anybody's going to care about us because we're so little.
Yeah, I can tell that you've been in PTA, and between you and Mr. Phillips' experience, you guys are the right guys to be interviewing us because you know a little more than the average person about what you should expect. The tag along issue is a great issue. And this is what I was mentioning about what differentiates you. Again, it's the Nancy Skinner issue. It's
we're going to book an appointment with her.
What are your political assets, right? And that's what our job is. That is what it will differentiate. And what Dale said is all politics is local. How do we leverage that? And there's this little guy called the California State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Wonder where he comes from. If you guys there's one of our clients who, honestly, his next door neighbor is the Speaker of the State Assembly. And in the office building that is in, the office that's right next door to his office is the office of the chair of the Assembly Ed Committee, O'Donnell. So he leans over the dais. He's the board president down in a district in Southern California. He goes, "Why would we need you?" I got all these contacts. And I said, because you've got the assets. You just don't know when to use them. And one of the things that we can do is call you and say, now's the time to press the button. Here's what's going down. Here's the way you guys can leverage those political assets to the advantage of the district. And here are the 3 or 4 issues you as a board have carved out that will align, because you guys can't watch what's going on in the legislature every day. That would be our job on your behalf.
Yeah.
And we've had that client, and that particular board member has been extremely happy. He'd be a great reference to talk to you guys. You guys have some really great assets right now as things have evolved, and you got to try to take advantage of taking. So tag along does not apply in your case. And again, it's about the small number of districts that say we want to engage individually, how do we make a difference? And that would be you guys.
Yeah, and the other questions are, yeah, so we've been in this so long, we don't feel like anybody will ever pay attention to us, no matter what we do, we'll just be a tag along. I mean, the other questions are really, once again, like, how do we goal set with you? How does the board work with you? How does staff work with you?
Right.
Some of that's probably internal, like how we figure that out, but
It is, and it may
know.
not be very different than what Dale would do. I think we have
Okay.
generally sensible approaches that we do the same kinds of things. We really respect each other the way we do this, which is that we would set up like a ledge committee or a ledge cohort of leadership at the district where we'd be setting legislative priorities, hopefully getting a document together. So we're going to know, instead of having to come back to the board every time to say, what about this bill or that bill, that we've got some principles in place and there's a bill that's introduced that goes against those principles, we're going to be all over it already on your behalf, checking with probably Tony or the superintendent to say, hey, we're going to fire off this letter. It's consistent with the principles adopted by the board. And we run that by you guys and make sure they're okay with it. And they let that piece of communication go. Sometimes we're going to want to engage the board member. In fact, frequently we're going to want to engage you guys in that process personally, because you're part of that political network that they see. I often joke around, and I think Mr. Phillips has heard me say this, in the back of their mind, they know a great ballot designation, if you ever ran against them, would be school board member. It's never far beyond their mind that you could ever run against them someday. They want to pay attention to what you think. And so you need to leverage your own political assets as board members. And then the last thing I want to say about that is that you and your colleagues, I just sort of looking at the fact that you've got, a number of new board members, is now when there's probably the greatest potential interest in actual engagement, getting something done, networking with folks at the state level, that's a time also to be considering doing some advocacy on behalf of the district.
Other questions are, once again, like, how do we gauge your success? A lot of this is back.
We have a unique thing in our contract. And I mean, I think it's very unique to other advocacy firms. I can't remember or know, really, I've never seen one of Dale's contracts, so I'm not sure what they do. But it was one of the tenets when I started this company. I said, we're going to have a 30-day out, no questions asked for our clients. And the reason why we're going to do that, there's a lot of contractors up here who they want to do a contract with you and they want to sign a multi-year deal. Everybody wants a multi-year deal. I don't even want a year deal. What I want is a contract that lets you out on 30 days notice, so that if we are not producing value for you as a district, we don't deserve to be retained by you. So it is extremely easy to get out of an agreement with Capital Advisors Group. To us, it's about proving our worth. And if, like, one of the things I really believe in, I do not believe in a newsletter service. If all we are is just conveying to you blather that's on pieces of paper, and that you're not engaging with us personally, we're not coming before the board and helping you guys help convey to the public some of the complexities in an easy way, but the challenges that Sacramento is saddling on the board, so that it's not the board's fault that something's getting cut. We're going to display it real clearly about what the state is giving you and what they're not giving you. All of those things are part of the deliverable. And I honestly think that it's in keeping with the idea of transparency before your own community, if we can help do that. And I think we've been real effective. I know when Tony was down in Santa Ana, we would come before the board, and I think they found it really, really helpful for people that wanted to blame the board for things that were really, put upon the district by people in Sacramento. So that's the accountability, is you can get out of it quickly, and we know we better be performing. It creates a great incentive for us to constantly be looking out for your best interest.
Okay. You covered conflict of interest. I understand how you're going to be paid. What else didn't I ask you?
You asked a great question of Dale, and I love that question, which is, what's some big accomplishment you did? So I had the advantage of being able to think about that.
I know, but you know what? I'm a little bit more familiar with your guys through PTA, so but please go ahead.
Because I mean, the example's a good one, because you guys could find yourself in this situation easily. The district has some really great challenges ahead of it. And one of the things to also be leveraging right now, there's a sentiment not just in your community, not just in the state of California, but across this country, that we have got to do better by our kids in urban communities. We've got to do better. And that the districts that have been struggling for a long period of time, we might have helped them out a little bit, but we never gave them the resources to actually turn the district around. We gave them resources to balance their books or get them out of maybe the debt or try to help them get just upright financially. But we never gave them the resources to actually turn around academically. It's more than just getting you even with that budget line item that you once had. It's about giving you the resources to make a difference. We can leverage that. We need to be having that conversation with them. So in LA Unified, for example, and a big district makes mistakes every now and then. They had made some mistakes in a previous administration in the filing of claims to the state of California on mandate reimbursement. They found about $50 million worth of fraudulent claims. So they basically told LA Unified, you owe us $50 million. So we get to it a year where we're really struggling. All school districts are struggling and the state's asking them to cough up the money. Well, it turns out at the same time, the state, out of all those claims, 50 million was absolutely fraudulent, but another 100 million is what the state actually owed them. So I thought, well, this is not that complicated. Let me go to the controller's office. We go to the controller and we go to the Department of Finance and we said, because they were trying to take $50 million out of that year's apportionments. And I said, why don't we just rebalance the checkbook? You owe them 50 now. You don't owe them 100. So instead of this taking the $50 million away from them right now, you owe them 100 million. You're not prepared to pay them. Why don't we just say you, the state of California, now owe the district $50 million and they don't owe you a penny? That's the deal we cut. Those things can only be done by these close relationships that, you know, Dale and I and other advocates that are up here have interpersonally with people that we've worked at. And I have a style of advocacy in our firm that is top down. I go to the elected officials first. That's where the relationship is. A lot of people say, oh, we're real great because we have great relationships with the staff. It's crucial that you have relationships with the members and these elected officials, because if you go to them and they don't necessarily agree with you, you can always work on the staff and then claw your way back up to the top. But I guarantee you, if you go to the staff and they say it's a rotten idea and you ever go to their boss afterwards, you are done. So it's a style of advocacy that's different than some of the other firms, but it's one that's very effective and it worked for LA Unified. And we have a number of examples that are kind of like that. So.
Okay, thank you. That was very good. Great. Okay. Anything else, President
That's
Phillips?
it.
Okay.
Commercial done.
Then I think we'll go to
Oh,
public comment.
hey, I cannot finish my presentation without telling you, and Tony has just been so unbelievable over the last several years, and you guys don't know how lucky you are. And it doesn't matter whether you pick us or not pick us, we'll be just fine. But I got to tell you, and Tony works great with any of the firms. He's got a track record of working with both of us, so he'll be great at that. But there are so many CBOs that do not get the nuances of the politics blended with the numbers in Sacramento. And he does the intricacies of Prop 9. Nobody asks me tougher questions than Tony Wold does on Prop 98. So I just wanted to put that little plug in, Tony. I just respect you so much that I couldn't be in front of a couple of your board members without making sure that I mentioned that.
Yeah, that probably backfired on me, but thank you so much.
That cooked your goose, Mr. Gordon. No.
Okay,
No,
probably
thank you
backfired
very
on me.
much.
Who
And
knows?
that's really nice to hear. I appreciate that. That's
You
really
betcha.
great.
So Kevin, I'm going to be rude. When I click remove, you're going to
Yes.
disappear.
Great to
Thank
be
you
with you
so
guys.
much for being here.
You betcha.
And Madam Chair, we do have one hand raised. Would you like me to go ahead and go to public comment first? Okay. So
I'm sorry, I'm on mute. I'm trying to cut the background noise.
we do have a second one now. So we have two hands raised. I'm going to go to the first. I don't have a clock because I didn't think of it.
Okay,
So
can
I will
do
keep
that.
it on my side there.
You'll
The
do it on
first
your
one is-
side?
Yeah, in my phone, Maria Cuellar. You should be allowed to unmute and talk.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Mariela Cuellar.
Oh, I apologize.
¿Cuánto tiempo tengo?
3 minutos.
3 minutos, muy bien. Bueno, gracias. Bueno, mi nombre es Mariela Cuellar y obviamente yo estoy aquí para aprender del presupuesto. Me encanta estar aprendiendo. Esta es mi primera vez que vengo, entonces soy madre de
Okay,
Richmond High School.
Stop, will you stop just for a second? She's here to learn, and she's a parent, and she's very happy to have this session. And she's a parent at Richmond High School. I think I got that right. Correct me?
Sí,
Okay.
sí, muy bien, señora Recles, gracias. Y me gusta hablar español. Yo soy bilingüe, yo soy madre y también trabajo para el distrito, pero me gusta hablar español porque para mí es muy importante que vengamos a estas reuniones para aprender cómo podemos estar involucrados en las decisiones de nuestro distrito, tanto como madre de familia y como trabajando para el distrito.
Okay, okay, hold on just a second. So she's speaking, can you repeat that? She's speaking Spanish? I forgot, I apologize.
No,
She's
y
speaking Spanish.
está bien, señora Recles. Yo voy a hablar inglés ahora, y solo quiero decir
I
en
only want
español,
to,
solo quiero decirlo en español para que ustedes vean que la necesidad que hay para que se interprete. Esto es para las reuniones de la mesa directiva, pero también interpretación en las escuelas.
um,
Okay, so I'm gonna speak in English now, and I
okay.
know my name is Mariela Cuellar, so I'm here to learn. For me, it's very important to be involved, and coming here for the first time to a committee budget, for me, it's a learning. That's how I learn more English. English is my second language. I came when I was 14 to this country, wonderful country. So I am here, and I'm speaking Spanish because I want you to see the necessity that there is for interpretation in meetings from the district. But
Thank you.
also I want you to see and hear that there's a need, a great need for interpretation in schools. When you don't understand what I'm saying, it gives you a disadvantage, right? So that's my first point. And that happens in classrooms too, with parents and students and teachers. So my question now is gonna be about the presentation that you guys had. I didn't understand much, but when it comes to advocacy and hiring consultants, I know they're just here to present. I wish that I can have access to the agenda so I can see more the presentation that they, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't. So my friend sent it to me, and then I click for access, but it says deny. So I don't have access to the agenda to see what you guys, the presentation, if they're there. So I would like to have that to kind of read more. I don't know if where it can be found and available. So my question is about these consultants and their advocacy and consultant staff. I want to understand, man, as a parent, I want to understand more. I know they're just coming here to present. I don't know if they're going to be higher or whatnot. So when it comes to advocacy, when I come to meetings and when I'm with my daughter's teachers in school and advocating, when I'm in my work, I advocate. I don't get paid when I'm doing advocacy when it comes to meetings as a parent. You know, these people are gonna get paid. Whatever, I don't know which one you're gonna choose, or you're not gonna choose anybody, but please, please, just really be careful on what you're spending the money. Because I can see that their sales pitch is really, really good. But I just want to understand how you in the budget, because I have a lot of questions in my school, Richmond High, about the budget, especially for English learners. I mean, I run for the school site council, and I'm in the school site council, so I'm very involved. So I just want to understand how you guys are gonna spend money and just spend it wisely, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
With that, I will move to our second one. It's Gabrielle Micheletti. You should be allowed to talk.
Hello. So I have some questions for you. I know you can't answer them, but these are just things I hope you will bring to thinking as you consider these consultants and lobbyists. One of my concerns after listening to those two pitches was they're very oriented at the board directly itself. And I'm wondering how teacher, community, student, and staff voice will be brought into what is lobbied for. And I'm also wondering, is what they're lobbying for going to be public to the community? So we know that what we're paying for to be advocated for is actually what we want and not just what a school board member wants. No offense, just, thinking about this as a representative position. I also kind of wonder if what they do is more proactive or reactive. Are they just trying to avoid, are they looking for problems that can come up and trying to see ahead of time how we can avoid those, or just problem pops up and now we need to really advocate to shoot it down? For example, as we know, after watching all of the work for Prop 15 this last election cycle, we know Prop 13 has damaged schools. We know that for keeping Prop 13 for businesses and large corporations. So what are they doing in terms of that? What are they advocating to increase the pie, to get more money for schools so that we're not scrounging around for pennies on the floor? Also, having watched and had my own job come into possibility of being cut last year after all the budget cuts, when we spend this money, they need to be held to a very high standard. As the former speaker was saying, we can't just be throwing money and hope what they're doing works. Like, what is the oversight on them to make sure they're really, really doing what they can for our district? Thank you so much for hearing my comments.
Thank you
And
very
that
much.
is it for public comment. Oh, wait, no, it is not. There's one more that I missed because I hadn't scrolled. So I'm going to allow Sarah Bree.
Sarah Breed. I'm a director in educational services for the school district. And I just wanted to make a connection to the two former comments. I do understand that this budget committee is a safe space to learn and to be supported. And that also, when you mentioned that one of the primary intentions of this committee is to support the work of the board and in advisory capacity. After hearing the two presentations, one of the things that I think is very important for this committee and also for making a decision about the work of the consultants is that we're leading from our vision, our values, and our beliefs about budgeting for equity. And I just want to bring that forward because I'm in the meeting today. I'm hearing a lot of wonderful technical details about advocacy, but I'd like to see a deeper connection to our vision for equity and how that's supported in the work that we do with a consultancy group. I do have the experience of working in a former district where we did a lot of advocacy work at the Capitol and were successful. And part of what made our committee successful was that we did have representation from multiple stakeholders in the groups that would actually go to the Capitol and present. So I thought that that was a very powerful example of how we can really advocate across the difference of our 5 cities. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'm honored to be here.
Great, thank you so much.
And that now is the end of public comment.
Okay, so now we move to discussion.
So I'll just say that the reason we brought this forward is
Mr. Wool,
not for me.
Mrs. Reckler, am I recognized?
Oh, yes, of course. Go ahead.
Okay, all right.
You got me. You're training me.
Thank you.
I'm
very
afraid
much.
to speak.
No, 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 no. So look, one of the things that I have to do in this meeting, right, is like I'm on the other end, so I have to model too, right? So
Yeah, no,
I'm supposed to speak when I'm recognized, and I'm supposed to, so I'm trying to model the other side as well. And you're doing a great job. Um, so I think this is a great idea. My first job out of law school was working for a consumers union in Washington, D.C. As a fellow, an Esther Peterson fellow. And as an Esther Peterson fellow, I was a lobbyist. Uh, and so I know firsthand that this work is important and that positive work, community-minded work can be done through this type of advocacy. It's not just for big corporations to have voices up at the Capitol, whether that's the state capitol or Washington, D.C. So I think it's a great idea. I do support it. I think that the comments around assets were right on the money. We have big assets here in this district. We have Senator Skinner, who's a major player. Our Assemblywoman, who has not been, in office as long as the Senator, Buffy Wicks, is who I'm talking about right now. She's a major player, not just at the state level. I mean, she's nationally a major player. We have, the state superintendent of public instruction, obviously major player. People are forgetting the state superintendent immediately before him only lives about 25 minutes away from here. The last two have actually come out of Contra Costa County. So we have, a lot of contacts, direct contacts that other districts don't have. And I believe that we need to utilize those contacts for the benefit of our community. I will tell you, since I've been on the board last year before the new board turned over, I mean, I got a telephone call, a secret telephone call, I'll put it that way, from a staffer in Sacramento. And they were like, you guys need to get up here. When they were saying you guys, they were talking about our district, right? Because you guys need to get up here and you need to be in this room because this meeting is happening, and we didn't really have, a way to do that, and the board wasn't looking at things that way. We didn't have, someone to, make the connection or set it up for us to be in that room. And we missed, an opportunity. I think that we have internal assets as well, right? I think that we have a great board. We have board members who I think, Trustee Reckler, correct me if I'm wrong, I think at one point you were the legislative person for PTA Bayside.
I still am.
You still are, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's right there. I mean, I'm telling you, my first job out of law school was a lobbyist working in Washington, D.C. We have the former union president. We have teachers. We have union. I mean, we are exceptional if we just stop and look at what we actually have to work with, internally. We have a CBO who is even presenting this to us, right? We have a lot of things just in-house, and I won't keep going, but there's more, right? Because, and then I think one of the caller ends actually talked about how do we, bring in, parent voice and teacher voice. Well, when I was in Washington, uh, what we would do is we would put together groups of people that would go up there, right? And so sometimes it was staff to staff, right? But if it was like a pitch or whatever, we would bring, and again, I was working for Consumers Union, so it was a different kind of thing that we were going after. But you bring people, you know, you bring principals, if that's the people you need to bring that day, or you bring teachers. Some days you bring parents, some days you bring a whole bunch of them, right? And so you put people, in the room that need to be in the room. And, and then there's somebody who kind of leads the discussion, but everybody plays a part, in that discussion. And that's the way you do it. So sometimes, yes, it will be staff to staff. Sometimes it will be, a board member or two. Sometimes it will be a whole group of people that represent different stakeholders in the district. That's part of the process if we're going to do it, um, correctly. Um, I do like the idea that, Mr. Gordon talked about around having the contacts, but not knowing when to use them. It's also not just knowing when to use them, it's also not knowing how to use them, right? So we could know everybody in the world, right? But if we don't know how to start connecting the dots, right? Or how to map out this plan, or even if we do know how to map out the plan, some of us, right? Like maybe you do, Trustee Reckler, because of what you did with, Ledge Advocacy for PTA, right? That's not your full-time job. You have a job. I know you do, right? I have a, so it's the equivalent of having staff. If you look at the district, if all of the employees were tomorrow somehow to disappear, right, we couldn't function, right? Because no matter how much skill is on the board, we actually need people to do work on a day-to-day basis. And it's the same thing with this, right? No matter how much skill is on the board, we still need people to do work on a day-to-day basis and connect dots for us. So I think this is a great idea. I think it's something that we should do, and I think ultimately it's something that will affect, our bottom line. And I think increase our bottom line. And I think when we talk about the squishiness of it, because it can appear to be kind of a squishy business, right? I think for me, the way we uh, measure success is what did we bring home? And what I mean by that is, okay, we're having a funding problem over here. Were we able to bring in additional funds? We're having an issue with some kind of regulation. Uh, I'll give you a great example. The issue around vaccinations. So when we began school, some of the families were not able to get vaccinations, and we were not able to count them for our ADA because they were not vaccinated. But if we could have, we should have been in the Capitol saying, hey, this is not our fault. We believe vaccinations are important, but right now people literally cannot get the vaccinations. So you need to give us a window and count these kids. So like that would be a prime example of something that is happening now or was happening that we could have dealt with through legislative advocacy, but we didn't have the vehicle, to really do that. So, I mean, I could sit here and come up with different scenarios like that all day long. But I think that this is a great idea. I think both of the presenters presented well. Um, I liked Gordon, to be frank, uh, more. I felt that he was more connected to K-12, which is, what we are. Uh, and I think that he spoke to, uh, the question around, they both spoke to this, but I think that he spoke to the question around, um, which is a good question, we're smaller than some of these other districts, are we just going to be an afterthought? And I think he spoke to that question very well. And I think, we have a particular story to tell. Uh, and I think that we have assets that we spoke about earlier that will also help to prevent us from ever, becoming an afterthought. I mean, one of the things that I like to do is try to look at the silver lining, in the cloud, and with all of the negative financial history that we've had in the past, that is definitely not a positive thing. But because we have had trouble and people know that, I think even that is a reason that people pay more attention to us if we actually come and speak. So those are my comments. Thank you for the time.
Great, thank you. So some of the things that are going through my head is quite a few actually. I mean, one is, like how would we prioritize or give them a list? How do we involve community in this? Do we have a legislation committee that, it has input into the process, or I think there's some work that needs to be done about how to organize this and transparently communicate some of the things we're trying to do, being that some of this is going to be squishy and there's a lot of back room and, we never really know. So those were some of the questions. For the vaccinations, that's a really good question. I mean, there needed to be a lot more around that. CSBA, CTA, I mean, not only just us, but like a massive drive. And even on an issue of vaccinations, I mean, would Kevin Gordon go running if, like I'm like, we need vaccination, would that automatically happen, or is it baked in a different way, or just some of the other things that are, I'm thinking about. The other thing is, like Nancy, I also wonder, we have all these people in our backyard, we talked about this before, but we should be setting up our own calls and going in there on a biweekly basis, getting on her agenda. I've spoken before that I think they're both, really underbothered, and that we could ourselves as a community organize and be in there talking. I think that would be important. I think it's an idea, I think it's an idea worthy of consideration. I feel like they have a good conflict of interest policy, and it feels like we could drop it very quickly. So it'd be $3,000 a month with a 30-day, see you later policy. I mean, right? That's what I understood.
I have the contract in my computer
So
in writing, yes.
it feels, like we could get, I mean, if it wasn't working. So it's just, for me, a question of how do we involve community? How do we outlay those priorities and, get everybody's voice in the room and on the list. And at the same time, explain, you may not get everything you want. This is not necessarily connect dot A to dot B, straight fashion. So those are the things my concern is. I also think it's very low risk. Not working, we're out in 30 days. So it was a good discussion.
Madam Chair, can I be recognized?
Yes, please.
So this is not really an action item, and it's kind of funny because I'm
No,
here.
it's not.
No, it's not, and we're not like voting on anything. So it's funny because I'm here. But do you want to give staff direction as far as we're not voting, but do you want to give staff direction as to the board? That's
I mean, I guess some of the direction I'd like to give is I'd like to know what the first assignments might be, or what, like how would we start to.
If I may, usually the process would be, if the committee thinks that this is something we should pursue, I can bring the actual item, a contract, on the board. It's actually because of the amount, it doesn't even have to go into there. It just is ratified, and then set up an agenda discussion item for us to begin. What are the areas of focus? What happens with advocacy? Right now, there's a lot in the budget that I know from the staff side, I would like to start having very specific conversations. And at the same time, for the board, what are the legislative areas? When I present the budget in a moment, something might jump out immediately and you go, start there or start there. The advocacy for immunizations, that's still my plan this spring, to go and ask to make sure that whatever they codify for attendance holds districts harmless this year for that purpose. In other words, they don't take and lower our ADA rate. And that's something that we can have built into the trailer bills as they design the bills for what is the way we're going to be funded next year. So really the direction would be, do you want a contract brought forward?
I mean, yes, but with a list, like some sort of a vetted list of what we're going after, with, I mean, we had comments about, supporting the work, leading from vision, equity, values of equity, vision of equity, making sure that we've got teachers in the room. So,
So I'm just gonna step in just a little bit because this is our first meeting. And I don't, if
thank
I
you.
start stepping on
Welcome.
toes, it's be like you're stepping on my toes.
No, you're not.
So what we would do, right, is we would make a recommendation to the board, right? You're gonna have on the 27th, you're gonna do your report to the full board, right? And so when you do your report to the full board, we'll talk about this later, but you'll talk about what we did in this meeting. And one of the and you'll say, right, that we heard this and we recommend that we, do this, enter into a contract. That will come back to the full board, right? And then we will, as a board, decide if we are going to, pass the contract. If we do, then the stuff that you're talking about, the visioning and the planning and our priorities, that would happen, after that. But the first point here is for us collectively decide if we want to recommend this to the
Okay.
board.
Thank you. That's helpful. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful.
Okay, so I agree, and it's a little odd because I'm here, but I agree, and you'll report this out, this recommendation.
But we're sure, right? It's 3,000 with a 30-day, 33,000 a month with a 30-day cut at any time for Kevin Gordon. The other one is different, right?
Right, I don't have a
Yeah.
formal proposal from him,
You have a formal from Kevin.
and that's from last year when I brought him forward the first time, and you heard him say that that's still valid.
Right. Okay. So just to clarify and help me understand this, so you would look at both and advance one that you thought.
Well,
Is that
I'm
how
going
it
to take direction here. You heard both. If there's a recommendation from you, I would follow that lead.
Right, but we don't have a price quote from right.
Well,
From the
I can
second one.
request it if that's the direction, but I heard from one of you that there is a preference. Other districts have both. I don't think we want to start that big and have both at the same time. We may, if we start seeing value. I would recommend you consider one to start to see if this is really a good fit for this board and the way we do our work, and that the benefit goes. And I'll be quiet.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm familiar with Mr. Gordon through PTA, so very familiar with the work.
Okay, I think I have my direction.
So, okay, what else? What else do I need to do? Am I good? Are we done? That's
No, just
bring that
maybe,
forward.
yes,
Okay.
we're just saying we're recommending Kevin Gordon, so it's for the record that people hear.
We're recommending Kevin Gordon for the record, and you'll tidy that up and bring it forward.
Correct. It'll be on the next board meeting item where we have discussion. I can't make the 27th. Well, I could, but I don't know that you'll discuss it at the 27th, and then it'll be
Okay,
agendized
great.
after that.
Thank you. Everybody. Thank you. Phew.
So there's a hand up, but this is for the same item. So we've already done public comment for this item. So I'm lowering that hand. We have two choices here. We can go back to cash flow if there's any questions on that, or we can go right into
Point
the
of
budget.
order, we're at 4:55, so we need to decide whether to wrap it up or extend the meeting.
Madam Chair, how much time would you like to add?
Dr. Wold, how much more time do we need?
For the budget, I would like to have 20 minutes to really explain several of the items. And then there's going to be questions. So I would recommend, we won't get there, but I would recommend you say till 6, and we'll be done before then. So we don't have to do this again.
Okay, and we also have our calendar and our,
Yes.
okay, so that should be pretty quick.
So, Madam Chair, I moved 6 o'clock.
Okay, and then do I second it myself?
There's only two of us. You can just take the motion.
Okay. Yes, so that's fine. Reckler, yes.
Phillips,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so
back to
what
the-
would you like to do first?
Okay, so we ended and now it's up to question time is my recollection. So I have a couple of just really general cash flow questions.
Mhm.
Why is this document important?
So it's very important because the one thing that a district gets taken over for and has loss of local control is if they run out of cash and cannot pay their bills. Budget is a lot easier to work through, and very few districts have the budget is what takes them down. It's the cash.
And when does the cash flow start to get less reliable? When do you, I mean, when do you, when are you really kind of guessing?
Well, we really aren't guessing. When we get past about 10 months and you start to cross 1 year to the next, that's when you start to get, to use the word we've used several times tonight, squishy. Because I can't tell you what the state's going to do in August of next year right now. I can tell you that I feel pretty confident based on the trends for the next 4 to 6 months there. Once you get beyond that, we've seen the economy turn around so many times in the last 14 months that 6 months is really where I feel comfortable every time.
And so as a chief budget officer and a board, how do we mitigate that?
One is that we need to view cash flow on a monthly basis and make sure that we're looking at trends. And when we start to see that we're even getting close, and in my mind, in a district our size, close as 30 million is all we have left, where we don't have at least a month's payroll sitting in reserves in cash. That's when I start to get nervous.
And when you're nervous, what do you do?
So what we do, we have a relationship with the county treasurer. Not only are they able to do the advance for the teeter, the county has a program where we can do borrowing from the county treasury at just 10 basis points above the cost of interest in the treasury. What that means for people to understand is when you get a home loan, you pay 3, 4, 5% interest. The county treasury money that's sitting in there earns just under 1% interest. We can borrow for 1.1%. So 1/10 of that amount from the county treasury. It requires us to do a resolution with the Board of Education, and that you need to have about a 60-day notice that you're going to run out of cash. So I was prepared to bring a resolution. Today, I thought I was going to be explaining to you that we're going to need to borrow for June and that we're going to have a cash issue and that we're going to need to do a resolution in March. I'm going to take the cash flow I presented to you today and meet with the county treasurer next week. We're all going to analyze it and we're going to determine whether we feel comfortable where we are, because right now it doesn't look like we need to borrow, but we're all going to say that's right on the edge. Do we feel that we should do the resolution anyways to be prepared?
Okay. The other question is for the community and for new board members, how do you want us to, what's the best practice in monitoring this?
I think the board asking us to present it and have it available is the first step. And then for the public, we continue to keep those posted so that they do get to see transparently what is happening with our finances on a month-to-month basis. Part of the challenge is the reconciliation process, because a lot of budget comes in, but the cash doesn't follow. For example, the state will say, we're giving you a new grant for $2 million. Go ahead and start spending it on September 1st. We will give you the $2 million on March 1st. And so understanding what's happening in the checkbook is probably as important as understanding what is happening with the budget.
I was thinking about some ways to make this easier. Some of the things I were thinking about is highlighting certain cells if they were on fire. I mean, negative, obviously, but I was thinking of a highlight system or a executive summary. I mean, I don't want to add more work, but I was thinking more along like how changes get pointed out as an idea. Any thought around?
So you
Around
saw
that
the
as well?
first, you saw tonight the first change, and this has been, no district's ever presented it the way I presented to you tonight. The third tab, which was bringing all the funds together so you can see them overlapped and see how it plays out. So the thought is we continue, every time a question gets asked, we continue to try to find a better way.
By the way, okay.
Most districts aren't prepared and don't have a system in place to do this, because most CBOs never had a cash problem. If you weren't in this, if you were in this role in the late 2010, 9, 10, 11, 12 with the deferrals, then you know cash. But most of the folks that are in my position, and even the directors, started in 2014, and we've been flush with cash since. So this is brand new. I sat in our county CBO meeting and people were going, what do you mean cash? What do we do? So we're all kind of reinventing it. And I think the board is doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're asking me and holding me accountable to watch. And I keep finding that nobody at the county was even watching, because there were times where we were close to cash negative in the past. And because we had other funds in there, nobody noticed. So we're trying to get a better practice.
Does everybody in the county use the same system, or are people open to using whatever system they want? Because I imagine being Bill Clark and getting 30 of these things and being like,
they get the SAC system, which is a dump from Munis. And the challenge is, and there's so much commingling of funds in there that it's hard to be able to tell what color each fund is. Because just when you saw our cash report that I put up, I'm showing several $100 million more than we can actually use for general fund, interfund borrowing, because the bond funds are in there. There's other special municipal funds that are sitting in the county treasury. It's so mixed and matched that unless you're looking at the micro level, you're not going to catch it. And best practice, folks, because it wasn't an issue, nobody looked at it. Now we are.
okay. And then I have a technical question, because I've worked in this world of Excel for a long time versus systems. What's in the system and what's in Excel? Because, you know, those formulas, when I see documents like this, I get a little.
So everything up to December is in the system. Once we pass December, that's everything that's actually been posted. Now, when you move into future state, that is all the projection. So it's the budget and the projection of when we anticipate receiving. For the receivables, there is an apportionment schedule that is created by the state of California that shows the percentages that they plan to administer. So it's all based on what we think is going to happen. And this is part of the word of the month in December to the budget staff and business staff was reconciliation. They didn't quite get it all done. So it's going to be the word of the month in January again until we're fully doing it. So the best answer is we're always about 2 months behind in the system. That's just the natural ebb and flow of how long it takes for financial information to post.
Is that for everybody or just
Yes.
for us? It's for
Every
everybody.
district I've ever been in.
So they run 2 months behind.
Yep. And we're
Basically.
always in a projection. That's why you'll hear in every presentation I say there's only one presentation the whole year that's accurate. Unaudited actuals. Because the books did close that day and that's what they said. And it hasn't changed. But everything else, if I were to run the cash report in 10 minutes, it's going to be different than
Yeah, I
what
know.
we printed.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I totally get that. The other question is in the general fund, like how do you control that big monster on a line, line item by line item basis?
So we have fund managers and the budget staff that are looking at it. The big piece comes down to your accounts receivable, accounts payable. Are we, when we do our purchase orders and when we work with our vendors, do we have outstanding invoices that we should have paid that have not been posted? Have we done the appropriate encumbering all the way through? And so I'm spending a lot of work talking with staff to make sure that we encumber things. A great example is indirect. Indirect is something that is charged to all resources. It's a percentage, it's a state requirement, but you cannot encumber indirect because it only gets charged when the expense is made. But if you don't recognize that, it looks like it's available money to spend if you look at just the bottom line. So I'm working on, you know what, we need to change that report so that while you can't legally encumber it, you need to encumber it in your brain so that it doesn't show up on the summary piece so that we don't overspend. And so we're trying to put systems like that in place so that we do stay focused on exactly where we are. And one of the things that we're working on, and I'll bring to another meeting, is the Power BI business intelligence. We now have an output for internal staff to start looking at what is really happening in Munis right now. We're going to be moving to the second phase of that, and I'll be bringing to the board a small contract to make it visible to our department leads and to our site administrators. And then once that's in place, the third one would be to make it visible to the public.
Okay. I think that's enough on this for today for me. I have a comment, but I have questions for now.
We do have one hand raised, and this is the cash flow item. So
Does Board Member Phillips have any questions?
I don't have any questions, ma'am.
Okay, good. Okay, then yes,
So
of course, the public comment, please.
So it is Mariela Cuellar. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. I appreciate it. I have a question. Obviously, budget is not easy for me to understand. I don't think for anybody it's easy to understand this muster, like Ms. Erekla said. I just want to understand, and I don't know if you guys can answer me, or if this is also run like a Brown Act. I don't know. But when it comes to budget and going to the schools, I know there's some titles that the school received, like Title I or different titles. But when it comes to Title III, the district decides how to spend that, and in some other titles. But I'm interested in Title III, and I just want to understand how the district decides that, and if it's the Department of Multicultural, Multilingual in combination with the superintendent. And now that you are here, Mr. Wolf, who are the people who are deciding how to spend this money on Title III specifically? And I'm also have a lot of questions on other titles, but I just want to have an understanding in how much money each school gets for Title III.
Thank you for the public comment. That is the last public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so board discussion. Do you have anything, Board Member Phillips?
It's good news that it appears that it's great news that it appears that we're not going to have to uh, borrow funds. I'm really happy to hear that. Um, I think it's extremely important that we do monitor our cash flow because the cash flow and budget are two different things. And we could, make a budget and it looks all nice and pretty. But that is this theoretical thing out there. That's not the actual bank statement, right? And so we really have to make sure that we're adhering to the budget, but that we're watching the cash flow because if we don't, and we end up in the red, we end up where we once were some years ago, meaning um, basically insolvent. And that's not something that any of us want. And I know that's something uh, Trustee Reckler or Chair Reckler that you have on your goals, particularly for this committee to avoid. So I think your questions were great. I don't have any other comments.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of comments. One of them is I do want us to think about an executive summary of some sort. This is in this transparency. It doesn't have to come up tomorrow. Maybe we think of something and then we go out to a few community partners and, feel that out because I do want this to be very community friendly, what we do. So I am thinking about an easy way that we, know danger signs or good signs or just some sort of idea. And I still have this idea of like highlighting the sheet in some way. Okay, we're at yellow, we're in danger right here. I think might be some ways to pull put some highlights on it. Another idea is best practices and understanding best practices, developing best practices, manualing best practices are some ideas that certainly for future agenda items and for making ourselves better. But that's really it. I mean, this was really helpful, and it was a good lesson, and I'm interested to hear from the community if they thought that was helpful as a first step. And not right now though, because this is just discussion. But send me a note. And that's anything else on this?
No,
That's it. And I agree. It's great news that we won't be borrowing money.
so
Terrific. Okay.
I'm
so
going to jump right into the
close
budget.
that and move on to budget.
So I believe you can see my screen now. And I'm going to go quickly, but try to go deeper, as deep as I can into each of these here as we go forward. And let me see if I can't make it actually a slideshow so it's a little bit bigger. So I'd like to take the governor's proposal, but take just a quick walk on what has happened literally since September of 2019 to today, and I put this in the precis of a much shorter presentation for Wednesday night, that I feel like we could almost get whiplash with the amount of changes in the budget. It has gone up and down. The sky is falling. No, it's great. No, now the sky is falling. Wait, they have money. They don't have money. And it's gone back and forth. And I think it's really hard to track what have we done and has what we've done made a difference and what do we have to do next? So that's really the budget story. And then I'm going to go into the details and the impact of the governor's budget proposal and where we believe we are right now. So this is our normal cycle of the mandated reports to the budget. The next official time we would have come to the board with any budget information is the second interim, which is March 10th. Now we'll be doing a presentation this week coming up, but that is the next time. And then if you're qualified, you have a third interim. We'll talk about that in a couple moments as well. You have the LCAP and the LCAP and budget adoption. I'll need to add a third one based on the governor's proposal. There's an addendum to the LCAP that has to be done before the LCAP. So I'm not quite sure how that works. They'll give us details, but there's a brand new thing as it pertains to the summer monies. that plays out. So here's our story. Back in 2019, in September, we disclosed a $39.9 million deficit in the current year. We needed to solve that immediately. And the way it was dealt with was we borrowed from Fund 71, which is our other post-employee benefits, our retirees, rather than pay using the general fund like we do every year. To save general fund money, we utilized that trust. And there's the exact amount that the balance went down in that fund, $14,299,000. In addition, we brought over from Fund 17 our strategic reserve that the board had protected for several years, $19.2 million there. And then the other solution we utilized, the district received a unrestricted early education grant of $4.5 million. And then we used fund balance for the last 1.7. And that's how we closed out the issue for 1920. Simultaneously, we began making budget reductions for the year that we're in right now. The structural deficit grew to 47.8 because each year you have new expenses just to keep the lights on. And so we had to move forward, and what we were able to accomplish is 19.8 million in negotiated reductions through MOUs with our bargaining units, another 2 million in management reductions, 6 million in contracts, 2 million in reducing sites. And then we had planned for this current year to use OPEB, the second portion of it, and exhaust that option, and then use reserves for the 2.2 million. That was before COVID and CARES Act. With that, we still would have needed to cut $18 million from the budget for the year coming up, 21-22. So that's where we were on March 1st of 2020. We had done all of those cuts. We had our plan for this year. We knew we would have had to cut 18 million for next year. So this is where we were in December. After CARES Act, after everything else, at the first interim, we talked about the fact that we closed the book with our Fund 17 having the required 3%, and we were able to put $35 million into a committed status. It's still in Fund 1, but it's 35 million committed to be used for future cuts. And what committed means versus assigned, committed means that it cannot be moved unless the board has a formal declaration. They basically pass an item to say, please move those dollars to this purpose. So it can be redirected, but the board has to do that. We determined we would not do the second OPEB transfer in the current year and anticipated that it would not be needed until 2022, 2023. This is December. We had a balanced budget. I noticed that we forgot the D in balance. I apologize for that. And we would have to utilize some of the committed reserves beginning next year. So based on that situation, we looked at having a structural deficit of $15 million that we would need to cut for 2022 and another 15 million for 2023. So $30 million was our structural deficit in December. Well, things have changed since December. And so here's, as we've been gotten used to, we're still flying that plane and it's still not put together. This is just a summary of what we talked about, the changes June to September. This is just as a review, how the budget changes, where you see the revenue, where you see the CARES Act was put in, how the OPEB transfer was not occurring in this current year, where it did the year before. So these are review slides that we did at the first interim, and I put them back in. This was our multi-year projection at the first interim. And so I'll take you down to a couple lines. The yellow highlighted is how the budget balanced for that year. And meaning revenue wise and expenditure wise, are we spending more than we're bringing in? Sometimes it's okay if you have specific carryover that's supposed to be used for one time to deficit spend. It's not okay if you are spending more money ongoing than you're bringing in for a long period. So this year we planned 394 million in revenue and our expenditures are 391. So at December, we anticipated that our fund balance would actually increase by almost 4 million at the end of the year. And when you look at what would be in that 48 million end of year fund balance, 8 million would be in the restricted side. That's your Title I, your routine restricted maintenance, your Medi-Cal, your mental health monies. Specific things can only be used for one purpose. We anticipated having approximately $5.4 million in assignments, things that would be carried over for specific purposes the next year. We would still have our 35 million in committed for budget reductions and the 3%, slightly above 3% in Fund 17. Moving to the next year, we anticipated a zero COLA and loss of any other federal CARES Acts. So our revenue was projected to drop from 394 all the way down to 358, and then a slight decrease the next year to 355. We had enough with that committed reserve to be able to absorb that year without making cuts and using those reserves. We would have a structural deficit in that year of 13.9. The next year, we would have recommended to use OPEB for 22-23. So you can see that in, and we would have had to be in the process of making cuts of 15 million. We did not credit ourselves for the cuts. And so assuming that we did use OPEB, we would have dropped that 35 million that was in our strategic reserve down to 18.9. We'd still be able to meet our obligations. So that was December. Then the governor came out, and here's what the state is in a very different situation. The Proposition 98 guarantees can increase by 3 billion. They are going to fund, at this point, a COLA, cost of living adjustment. Remember, this year we got zero. So the governor's proposing that he's going to go backwards in time next year and give us a 2.31% COLA for this year, and then a 1.5% COLA for 21-22, which equals a 3.84% COLA that we would attribute for next year. For us, that's about $10 million ongoing money. And of that 10 million, approximately 1 million of it will be for supplemental and concentration grant use only. I want to mention that and stop for just a second. When we get money from the state, it comes in two different slices. Supplemental concentration is the monies that we use to support the goals and priorities that come out of the LCAP. And in the past, the district hasn't stated how much that new money is going to be for supplemental concentration and addresses its budget issues first. I believe that you need to parse it out. That 1 million needs to sit with the LCAP priority side, not on the general fund. Oh, it's going to be taken for budget reductions, and in a more transparent way. And we'll talk more about that as we go, but we wanted to separate those out. The governor proposes an extended learning grant for the summer to support lost learning, and that's equal to 4.6 billion. Those monies would need to be used by June 2022. And for us, that would be $20.4 million. There's also that additional reopening schools money. That has not been accepted yet, and the language keeps changing, but that could be another up to $2 billion that gets thrown. Our guess is it's likely going to get merged into the 4.6 billion. That's some of the language from the most recent thing that Kevin Gordon wrote that they're hearing And those are some of the updates when we do enter into a contract that we would get there. What is projected though is the state is going to start returning to a state deficit in 22-23. The deferrals for this year are staying. However, next year they will not have deferrals except for in June of 2022. So back to the cash, that's important. I had not given a very good cash report to the board because I was convinced that until the state told us otherwise, they weren't going to pay back the deferrals until later in 22-23. Now it's much more rosy. So the expanded learning grants, 4.6 billion, one time 20.4 million. We expect it's going to be categorical. The big things are we're going to need to complete an addendum, just like the LCP we did in the summer. And we're going to need to describe how those funds will be used. That addendum would need to be approved by June 1st. So that backward mapping it, that means the last meeting in May, we would need to have that. The staff is already beginning to have discussions about what a robust summer program will look like, and we'll be asking the board for direction as well. And so we will take that and design this addendum based on what we're going to do to make a difference over the end of the school year and the summer with those dollars. Part of the formula for each homeless student, they start by giving you $1,000 per homeless student. They then go and calculate per ADA afterwards. This is just a quick representation of how taxes come in. And so you can see the majority of taxes are personal income. You can see that sales tax went down last year. It's actually up for this year, but then it drops in 21-22. Kind of odd how that ebbs and flows. The corporation tax is much higher. So corporations did well so far. As much as we see all these shuttered smaller businesses, the bigger ones are doing just fine as we go. But here's the critical thing to see. Because of all the cash now, the state actually has a surplus last year that they've attributed that nobody was sure was going to happen. They have a surplus this year, and they're going to have a significant surplus next year. But then they go the exact opposite direction the next 3 years. So the economic projection is that we're going to start seeing the state having to go into their reserves very quickly. And so I think it was very important that we understand what's happening in the future so that we're prepared in the present. This shows the graph of Proposition 98. It looks very good, going up, up, up. If I would have taken the one that they presented about 4 months ago, you would see the 21-22 being much lower than the 17-18, but that did not happen. One of the things that's really important, we talked about immunizations. Next year, we're going to be funded on the same ADA we are funded this year. They're holding us harmless. So we don't lose revenue for the decline that we've had in the last 2 years. We will in 22-23 if the students don't come back. Then you would see a significant decrease in revenue. We don't think that's going to be a concern for us because we do believe that we're going to have quite a few of our kindergartners that didn't attend return. We're hoping, we think with some of the investments we're making, we believe we can really use 21-22 to avoid this cliff, but that is something that's of great concern for us. The other thing is the unduplicated count. Our staff and community rallied and we got our free and reduced lunch count to be higher than it was last year. So we went from losing $15 million to breaking even. And the reason we break even is because we're down 500 students, but we're higher on the percentage. I have to continue to show you how much as a percentage of payroll we have to pay for PERS and STIRS. You can see the percentages are still going up each and every year. This means the same service costs more. STIRS, same issue. One thing that's very important for this board to hear. based on the state being flush with cash, there was a provision put in to the law 4 years ago that if the state met certain criteria, districts would be capped on their reserve percentage at 10%. We all know that the governmental guidance is that you should have no less than 17% in your reserves, and 17% is just over 2 months payroll. 10% is less than a month's payroll as we go forward. And so that is something that is really important, that that reserve cap will come into effect in 22-23. And the district, what that means is your assigned, unassigned, and Fund 17, those three can be no more than 10%. If it is, you must spend those dollars. Anything that is committed can continue to be committed for that purpose. And so we talk about the fact that the great cash situation for the state is projected to drop right when the state starts to go the wrong direction. We will have to spend down our reserves if we are not prudent about it. And what's going to end up happening is you can get 2 years as a waiver. So you can petition to the county to say, no, we're not going to do below 10%. And that would be certainly a recommendation. The other recommendation, though, is that you truly start looking at where else can you place dollars to ensure that you're protected against the state downfall. And so one of the things they suggest is you put dollars in other funds. And so in a moment, I'm going to talk about what I recommend to the committee to consider recommending to the board as we go forward, making sure that you commit resources rather than assigning. And that's what we had done last year. By committing for budget reductions, that protected those resources from going forward. You can always do the waiver, but you have to be careful. Flipping gears, the federal government in December passed a second act of support for schools. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, ESSER, was approved for the second time. We're receiving ESSER money right now. That's what the sites are using for their budgets, and that's what we use to maintain some of our staff. We will get, for this coming year, actually we'll get it before this year's out, $24 million in one-time funds. In addition, President Biden has hinted at some very aggressive support. It's not in the slides because it happened after I published this. He just proposed another $1.9 trillion aid package, but we believe this is going to be an administration that's very positive for public education. We all know Dr. Jill Biden is an advocate, but that's first bullet, I think, is a really big deal to us. When we talk about leveraging relationships and people, Cindy Martin is the superintendent of San Diego Unified. She was just announced as the #2 in the Department of Education in Washington. Having somebody from that role that understands, and she was the one a week ago advocating to the governor here on how we need to fund public education adequately in California. And she's now in a level of influence. So good friends. The other pieces there is that Biden is recommending that the federal government pay for the cost of testing, the federal government pay their fair share of special education, and a conceptual tripling of Title I funds. That would be a big deal to our district. So this is just the detail on how you can use ESSER. It's the same things we've done before. They added 2 more items that weren't allowable expenses before, and that is school facility repairs and improvements to ensure that we can reduce the risk of virus transmission, inspection, testing, maintenance, and ventilation projects if we have to do something quickly. Those are really important areas as we start looking at safe utilization of our facilities for our students. This is just a pictorial look at President Biden's area. A couple other ones. I'll bring both trustees' attention to the bottom middle box. We are very much hoping, because that is an area of need that we have heard over and over and over again. And this would be very well received to be able to produce more services in that way as we go forward. So this is just to explain what the CARES Act and ESSER have done. They helped us bring back supports. So we were able to have them this year. We might have lost them in future years. Now we get to keep them. Maintain things that definitely would have been gone. Added some new supports that we're going to be able to continue, because we'll take exactly what we bought this year with them, we'll spend with the ESSER now. So all 24 million, a lot of it is going to go right to keeping things again and being able to move forward. It's now going to allow us to really continue doing the things that we've been wanting to do and moving forward. It doesn't mean we're adding all over the place, because one-time monies, if you add ongoing expenses, you end up in a financial hole very quickly. But we'll be able to do very specific one-time investments that will make a difference. So here is what that MYP looks like today. And I put very rough because there's too many details we don't know the calculations for. So we had to do what I call back of the napkin math. Regina's sitting in the audience and she's going, please don't say it, this is the actual number, it's gonna change. But you'll see the 394 and the 391 didn't. But you'll see I added in revenue 24.2 and that extended learning grant from the governor. Both of them, as I'm reading it, we're gonna receive at least budget the money in the current year. Too late to spend it in the current year. So it's going to end, our ending fund balances are going to get much larger. And so what you'll see is that we project a $57 million ending fund balance. But on the right in blue, you see something, and I want to really go to that. We're looking at our cash flow and everything that's happening. We believe that we will have enough money dropping at the end of the year that we should take our general fund and repay OPEB, that money we borrowed from OPEB, put it back before we close the books. And I'm going to be recommending to the board that they direct me to do exactly that. I'm also going to recommend to the board that we repay Fund 17. And so you'll see Fund 17 show up here at the bottom. It's at 14.7 million right now. I'm recommending that we transfer back to bring that balance back to $35 million. And that goes along with the board's policy of maintaining a 9% reserve in Fund 17. I'm recommending that we reduce the committed from 35 down to 20 million, because again, we're feeding into Fund 17. The assignments, the 10.4 million, is to ensure that we have enough money to adequately and appropriately implement the programs the board approved staff to move forward with at the last meeting, such as the visual and performing arts, the new career trades focus, getting the virtual school running. We don't want them to be reliant on ADA the first day. We want to have funds in place to ensure that they are self-sufficient over a period of time. So putting some assignments in, additional assignments will be for lost learning and some of the things we did this year as well. So we made an estimate. That number will change as we talk to the board and we get farther along on the priorities. The restricted balance is much larger. Previously, we said 8 million. And what we're talking about is the ESSER and the extended learning really is going to be very specific purposes. So by dropping it to restricted, you know it's going to go to that purpose, and then it comes back out. Moving forward, we added the cost of living increase in for the next 2 years, adjusted for enrollment and unduplicated count. And then the second half of the extended learning came in. We immediately increased the expenditures all the way up to 402 million from 391, because we had anticipated dropping down about 15 million less being spent next year. So not only did we put that spending back in, we put in additional spending for that summer program that will be to be determined. That's our first estimate, and you can see it draws down from the restricted balance. We still end at the end of next year even with that deficit spending, because of all the money coming at the last second, it's intentional. We have a balanced budget. We're able to maintain the 35 million in Fund 17 and the 20 in the committed. Going to this third year, we again finished paying down and spending down the restricted balances. The assignments you can see would decrease because we're using those to implement those programs. We would end 22-23 with 35 million in Fund 17, with 20 million committed for future cuts. And the first time we would be needing to do cuts is 23-24 at this point. This is a dramatic change from where we were just a little while ago. It's utilizing each of the resources appropriately. It also means that we would have that OPEB back to protect us. Should something go wrong, we would be able to go right back and borrow from it again. So that's a safety net. And the board could even consider at later in the 22, if things get more positive, putting a little bit more money into that OPEB to protect the district for future years. We would be just under the 10% when the law kicks in. At this point, at 9.46% would be the reserve that would be attributable to that piece. So I spent a lot of time on this to show that there's been a lot of moving parts. This is the initial projection, but it's a much better situation. So again, what we're recommending is to restore Fund 17 to 35 million, to repay OPEB. We're not going to use it, and pay back what we borrowed. That's what we promised, Mr. Phillips. I remember you calling me very specifically out in a board meeting about that OPEB. So I made you a promise. I'm recommending that I keep that promise as we move forward. We did not deficit spend last year. We will not this year. We will deficit spend the 2 years following. However, that's intentional because of this. What is very important though, we are doing our budget based on the staffing ratios that we have today.
Right.
If the contract changes and we need to change that ratio, everything I just presented to you is now different, and our structural deficit will come back into the current MYP. Right now, we've been able to move it out to the third year. It will come back in the second we add ongoing expenses and not just do one-time things. It will change pieces. We could right now move to a positive certification. I'm not sure that I want to make that recommendation yet, but the county office and FCMAT are in discussions with us about the fact that we may recommend at second interim to move to that positive certification. We're not yet ready to make that fully determined. I want to just finish on this slide here. The cuts have now been moved likely out to 3 years from now. We're going to monitor each time. Advocacy, we just had a very long conversation about it. My bold, and I don't have to do it anymore because you already give me direction, it's more important than ever. Investments, this board has proven that they are going to invest in this community and make a difference. And I believe that that's going to pay off for generations to come. The funding shifts, the CARES Act has enabled us to maintain services that we would have otherwise lost and get our fiscal reserves back to where they were before we started. This is probably the most positive news I could ever give to the district as we go forward. And this is just our summary. We're doing our planning. We're investing in people, data tools, and services that will support all of our student populations. We'll continue to work collaboratively with our employee groups to really make our distance learning program shine, keep the budget reductions, but then build towards a reopening and have the best and most robust summer program you've ever seen as options for our families as we go forward. With that, the rest of it is backup there that I'm not going to go into today, but I just put it in for context. For the board meeting coming up, I'm only bringing forward about 6 of these slides. It's a much more condensed. With that, I'm going to stop and pass to the trustees. Thank you for indulging me, and hopefully that was the deep dive you were looking for.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're moving on to questions. President Phillips, would you like to start with anything?
Thank you. I have a few questions. If we were to balance our structural deficit coming this next school year, so 21-22, what would that look like?
And this isn't a dodging answer. It looks like our structural deficit is about 10 million. There's so many one-time funds flowing through our budget and so many one-time programs. And in COVID, it's not a perfect number. The only thing I could do to get to that 10 million is I took out everything that is one-time in revenue and everything I think is one-time in expense on paper, and I got to a $10 million number today, and that's 3 years out because of the different reserves falling through. So that's where I see us as of today. So in a normal MYP, you'd be doing 5 million in reductions each year. You'd probably, you always phase it out. You never do the whole thing and then end up with a windfall of 10 million because you miscalculated. That's always the concern as you overcut. So I would say it would be 5 each year, but we will be ending with significant fund balances for the next couple of years right now.
Is it possible to balance our structural deficit for 21 and 21-22?
I believe it already is because of all the one-time funds coming through. If you were to say that you don't maintain certain programs and you cut them out, then because you want to use those funds for something completely new, that would be the difference. Is, are we going to reduce ongoing staff there that are providing services to do something different with the dollars? So in a sense, they are maintaining things.
You just showed a multi-year projection that has us in the red within the next couple of years, which means that the budget is not sustainable over time.
No.
So I'm asking, go ahead.
So I'm going to go back. I think, let me reshare my screen with you. Because we're receiving all this money this year in May and June, what's happening is we're having to put 30 to $40 million is going to show up in the budget on the last day of the year. That all carries over. It's no longer revenue the next year, but you have to spend it. So by definition, you're going to have a red overspending for those 2 years because you have all of that carryover that you could not spend the year you received it. So I can try to show that really quickly. Let's see, where did that document go? All right, sorry. I had closed one document, so I have to find the next one. Let me get out of that and bring back this and then share. There we go. So to quickly show you what I believe you're talking about is right here, the 16 and the 13, correct? So the reason for that is these dollars here are being received in that year, but they're being spent in that year. So they are not up here in the revenue, but they do start to show up in the expenditures. And so it looks like a structural deficit. It's not. We're actually spending, when you add all that coming over, we're not even spending all 34 of it in the first year. We're spending it over 2 years there. So that's why there's a negative here. Otherwise, it would be like it is this year. See how we end the year with $38 million unspent there? That's because of the way it's received in accounting. If I had moved it over here the way it should be, you would see a large influx in that year and no structural deficit there. And then if I moved it over, you'd see no structural deficit there. So we do not have a structural deficit for until 23-24.
And you're saying that's because I guess this is
inflated
what I'm
the
not I guess this is what I'm not understanding, right? So if you're telling me in 23-24 we have a deficit, then how do we not have a structural deficit? Like that doesn't. So for me, in my mind, there's no structural deficit if we're looking out, and I know like the amounts change over time, but if we're projecting out and I don't go into red, there's no structural deficit. It may not be a deficit this year because something came in, but I know if I have costs that are on the books that are going to keep showing up over time, and that over time I can't pay for those costs, then I have a structural deficit, even if right now I have the cash.
So
does what I'm saying make sense?
Yeah, so I'm going to show you the formula here. I'm highlighting a very small highlight there. I actually thought this question would come up. Our expenditures for 21-22 are projected at 373 million. I added 29.2 million in expenditures, making up a guesstimate of what we might spend for extra learning, summer, all those things that are going to be one time. And so I artificially increased our expenditures from our MYP. We actually are getting 375 in revenue and spending 373. There's no structural deficit that year. So if I did this would change it. That's because of the revenue, and that's what changes. Now you see the structural deficit's gone.
Okay, I will come back to that in the comments part. Am I right in that I think it was 22-23, maybe it was 23-24, but right around the same time that we're expected to be in the red is around the same time that the state is expected to go into the red?
Yes, sir. Which is why I'm recommending we build up reserves right now.
Okay, so that's the preparation for what you see coming.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then putting the money back in the OPEB, that's the preparation also for what you see coming.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then can you explain a little bit about the strategy of assignment as regards to
So assignment versus commitment. And in the case of the academies, I'll probably recommend committed. Committed means we're doing it and this is what it's for, and we're not really going to change. Assigned means we think we should do this, but we're not quite sure. So, and we didn't talk to the board yet. So, or we didn't have enough time to define it, but we want to make sure we have a plan. We put it in assignment. Committed means we've got the plan. Everyone knows what the plan is. It's going this way. So it's really a choice there in their strategies. Some boards only want committed. Other boards want to have flexibility for assignments. I believe you don't just let it drop to the bottom line without some sort of plan. That's this year. We didn't have time. We didn't know what the dollars were. So we did assignments and then allowed the board to say, no, go this way or that way. And I believe this board will probably want more commitments than assignments. But that's me putting words in your mouth, so I apologize.
And And if we do the assignments, then we don't have to worry about the spin down of the reserve at some other point. That's a
No,
way to get around
commitments.
some of that.
Yeah,
Commitments, avoid
are-
spin down.
Yeah,
Okay. And then my last question is the artificial inflation of expenditures that you just described. Um, and maybe you can't answer this now. That's fine. But if you take out your artificial deflation, um, what do things look like? What does that mean for us? Because I've said this in the past, right? Like I don't necessarily feel. What does that mean? Like,
here's the best way I can describe it. I really wish when the state gave us one-time monies, we could have two budgets. We could have our budget, and then we could have a one-time monies budget and keep them completely disconnected, because then you would see what's real and what isn't. It's kind of like getting a bonus. You get a bonus and you get it a couple of years in a row. So you start planning as if it's real, going to be there every year. And we're limited. We have to show exactly how much money we got in one number and exactly how much money we spent in one number. And it doesn't break out. So what would happen is we would be balanced next year if all of this was not in there.
if all of the artificial inflation.
And the one-time monies both have to be taken out. And as an accountant, every time you put something on one side of the ledger, you have to have a balancing entry. And so I had to put in a balancing entry. It's nowhere in the system. That was Tony Wold typing in 29.2 as a guess, and that's why it says very rough.
Would it be wrong if you put in a number that actually had us, and I don't mean, and I feel kind of funny saying this because it's almost like cooking something, right? Right? Because like you're describing like, this is actually artificial and it wasn't really this, right? And and whatever estimate that you put in there, like would it, I'm done.
I get the question. I'm going to answer it this way. If I don't put in the expenditure, but I put in the revenue, it's all sitting there and everyone's going to go, what did you do with the money? So it really is that we have to prove that we're spending those restricted dollars that are coming through.
We have to prove that to who?
Basically, I can't just leave money sitting in well, I guess I could just leave it in the reserves and have no expenditure. So yes, that wouldn't be the normal way you do it though, because then they go, you thought you were going to spend 350 million and you spent 390 this year. The criticism is that you didn't plan.
Who is they? Because I get it. Like what I'm.
Point of order, we're at 5:59, so we'd like to put another 10 minutes on this thing so we can.
I moved 10 minutes and I'm gonna stop talking.
All right, second.
Thank you. It's a great question. They is the collective. Folks, a lot of people look at the budget and have comments. So we try to be as transparent as we can. That's my favorite word ever. And say, yeah, we expect we're going to spend this much. But I get your point, and the board can direct me to do many things.
I have no more questions.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a couple of things and then I have a couple of comments. The first one is, I can't remember which meeting because we've been in so many, but Demetrio talked about reopening costs and to, no matter when we're doing this or where or why, but it's going to cost more than we think. So
that's part of the 29.2 million.
29.2 million. Okay.
Yeah, it's not all for reopening, but that is part of that number. Is we know we're going to be spending money. I authorized $500,000 today in PPE, getting more.
Okay, and so somewhere that is earmarked and we're confident that we can.
We will be ready.
Okay. The other question is, Federal, do we have any idea when we think that's going to get firmed up, or that's just,
The ESSER's firm, that's the number. The question is, when will we get it?
right, when will we get it? Do we have any,
Yeah.
we don't know. Okay.
No.
Then, so is there a counter argument to not repaying OPEB and Fund 17? I want to be very clear that I am in favor of this, but is there a counter argument?
We have needs today. Overspend, spend every dollar you have right now, worry about next year. But my job is to look at the 3 years. I see what's happening in the state in the out years. We made a promise. I recommend that we keep that promise and stay prepared for both things and still spend for the kids today. So I'm trying to find the right balance in my recommendation as your CBO.
Okay.
But that would be the counter argument.
Why would we not want a positive certification?
The issue is all of our contracts expire June 30th. If any new expense comes in, that could immediately change our situation. So there's some areas that still need to be negotiated and addressed there. And that's the only reason why. But I believe at this point, I have to have another meeting with FICMAT, but I think they're going to sort of recommend that we move that direction, which is pretty cool that we're back to a positive certification as long as we stay the course.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, but I'm going to make a comment that's probably going to be like, phew. No. No, it's great. I mean, it's great. It's just, it's tap dancing on the moving floor. Okay, so those are my questions. I have more, but we'll save them for another meeting. And then we will go to public comment.
There is one public comment. Mariella, there you are.
I guess I'm the only one here. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. It's a lot of information. My ESL brain is exploding. And I'm hopeful that things will get better. I know it won't happen overnight, but I'm also very excited about our new president implementation on the new projects for education that warms my heart, and to know that his wife is a teacher, as an educator. It's, for me, that's I don't have words, but I want to be realistic too, that our district has a lot of challenges in the budget. I want to think about the nows, like I know summer school is coming, and you said there's going to be about $20 million that will be implemented for summer, if I understood correctly. I want to make sure that the board and all of us in the district, all the families, really take advantage of this money, and that the instruction that when the summer school classes start, it's very, I know it's going to be virtual, but please make sure, board members, that when students are receiving summer school, it has to be synchronous. Please don't let teachers say, oh, you have to do this in the computer on your own, because that's a waste of money and time.
On a time check, we have 2 more public comments, and you've got about 20 seconds left.
Okay, I just want to emphasize that, and just thank you so much. I'm learning a lot in this committee, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. The next public speaker is Jose De Leon.
Good afternoon, board members. Mr. Wall, thank you for the information. It's very good to see that we're moving in a good direction as we're coming into negotiations. Also, I'd like to also encourage that when new projects are being built, like the art school or any other type of additions to the sites, make sure to include all the administrators. Eventually, they're going to have to manage what the teachers are doing and how the program's supposed to work, and they'll be ultimately responsible for them to be successful. And also, some of the administrators have been working on academies and small school models already. Make sure you bring them into the conversation. Some of these conversations have been a surprise to many people from the last board presentation. So thank you for this time, and thank you for the positive outlook on the budget.
Thank you. We have one more speaker. I'm going to take a liberty. Normally, we'd say first and last name, but we didn't announce that earlier. So with permission, I'm going to allow them to speak. Gabrielle.
My last name. To hear the ins and outs of this. So thank you for sharing that with us, Dr. Wold. And in the numbers, I just want to, as you think about this, always remember that equity lens you guys like to bring to this, especially in a year that has really increased inequity. For bringing that lens to this, and for whenever you're thinking about these numbers, that they have the outcomes of lives of people behind them, from the outcomes of students' lives, from the education they get, to the outcomes of the people who are employed here. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment.
Okay, great. So just a couple of brief comments, because we're almost out of time. I'm not extending this thing again. Dr. Wold to talk all night. So I am concerned about attendance. I am concerned. I heard, I'm a Freakonomics crazy person. There's 500,000 less births this year. There really is a baby bust. And that was driven by economic factors. And we're going to see that immediately. We're going to see that in 3 years. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what the distribution is, but births are down. So I want us to be aware of that. I've talked about kindergarten like 50 times. So, you know, I want to be actively recruiting that, because it makes a big difference in our outlook. The other comment I wanted to make was I wanted to assure Regina that I've had her job before. And so I will, Regina, I hear you, and you let me know when it's good to go. And the reality is that I think we do need to look at some of our staffing ratios. You know, we got kids in the classrooms. I've got a high schooler. If I get one more email about counselors, if I hear one more thing about counselors not having enough, larger class sizes. So I think, you know, we need to be thinking about restoring some of that if we can. It's not so pretty on the ground in some of those areas. And that, I think, is, those are the main ones. Thank you. Anything for you, board member?
Quick comment for me. I would like to see the budget balanced for 21, 22. And if that is and if we are inflating expenditures and that's what's making it look like it's not balanced, then I don't think that's what we should be doing. I do agree with parking money in reserves. I do agree with some of the assignment things that you're talking about, but if we're inflating expenditures to make it look like it's not balanced, I don't agree with that. I want to see a balanced budget, especially if that's the reason it's not balanced.
Yeah, I do have
That's my comment.
Yeah, I do have one other thing on that, and that is I don't think it's a bad idea to cook two you know, one with the bonus money and one without, I think might be a worthwhile, you know, I don't want to make you do more, but you know, that's kind of,
Yeah, I don't know how to do it yet.
Yeah, I
so
know.
I'll be creating it on the fly. But that's what we've been doing for the last year. It's actually kind of fun, you know, except Regina doesn't think so.
Regina, I won't make you do it.
But we will work on that because we hear what you're saying. And I think this is just, I'm not delivering the message right.
No, it's a
to
lot.
where-
I'm not, it's a lot. I'm not, we need to figure that out together. So, okay, with that, thank you to everyone. Okay, action item, we have a calendar. Can we bring that up very
Yes,
briefly? We're like
give
out of
me a
time.
moment and I'll
Okay.
find that document. There we go. I found it. Okay. And share screen. There we go. Right here.
Okay, so the move is to adopt the meeting dates, and then where it says annual topic, I'd like that changed to meeting topic, and that will just be one of the beefier pieces. There could be other things. I also would request that we have subject to change as the conditions change, if that is okay. And then I'm imagining we're going to drop in more alignments with board deadlines as we have them, that it would also be a subject to change on that. So if we would, let's go ahead and move for any questions on this. Okay, no questions, public comment.
Let me check. I'll unshare. I do not see public comment.
Okay, and then discussion, I have none, except that, you know, I'd like to see this again and, you know, get ideas that are coming in and, you know, work through, you know, these are just some of the things, and I want to hear ideas because there's millions of them. Okay, so we'll move to adopt the calendar with the small changes.
See Mr. Phillips' hand.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No problem. So there's a facilities meeting that we have on the calendar for 6/11.
He was moving it. He was moving it to the 18th.
Who is he?
Louis Freeze was suggesting moving it to the 18th. The 11th was important for budget because it's right between the public hearing of budget and then the adoption of budget. If there's going to be any changes between, we would want to be able to do it here. That was the only reason. They just happened. We had to move back a week because of the budget cycle. I apologize, but that was the only reason.
So I'm just going to say this really quickly. I am the chair of the facilities committee. I don't want to hear that staff moved the facilities committee in the budget committee.
Understood. Thank you.
That's not proper, and I don't want that to happen again.
Okay. So the reason we would recommend doing budget in that cycle is because of the way budget has to do a public hearing and a final, there's never an opportunity to change it. This would give us an opportunity to have a conversation right after the board meeting and the public hearing, which we normally don't get.
So it would flip. So this meeting would be the second Friday and the facilities would be the third.
That would be the request.
Okay. And I would also have to make sure that the facilities member, which is Christian, is available as well. So
yeah.
Again, don't ever change my calendar again without telling me.
Apologize.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm okay. Trustee Reckler, I don't know if you want a meeting in July or November, but other than that.
I would say that we're okay now, but certainly Dr. Wold said that he was open to whatever. Hopefully I'll have left the state and we'll be able to get out of this for a while. So we'll see about that. I'm completely open to changing this. So if we could adopt it with a subject to change, I'm very happy with that. And so with that, may we move adoption?
Sure, move adoption.
Okay, and I'll second that. And we need to vote. Since it's the two of us.
It's a little silly, I know.
I know. Okay, so Reckler, yes.
Phillips, yes.
Yes. Okay, and then we're up to our last item, which is our next meeting will be February 26, 2021, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. We will not run this long. Oh my God. And you know, let us know how it went. Very curious to hear comments and how we can make it better. And with that, we are done at 6:16. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Wold. Thank you, Ms. Vega. Thank you, Regina. And everybody have a good weekend.